Hi, Steve McGough here. Steve Gooney McGough, OHS class of 1972. And this is episode 5 of the 50 years of Owatonna hockey history. And this episode will concentrate on the 1971-72 season when we won the first league title. So off we go. This is the team picture of the 1971-72 Owatonna High School hockey team, the varsity team, and that year we became the Southern Minnesota Hockey League champions, and we had an 18-4 overall record. So I'd like to introduce the team. In the front is me, Steve Gooney McGough. Next to me is Bill Chesney, then Mark Christo, Johnny Olson, who was one of the alternate captains, Dan Boke, who was our captain, Rick Whitrock was another alternate captain, then Chuck Pribble, Kevin Owen, and Brad Austin. In the back were the coaches. Bill Ryden was the assistant, and Dudley Otto was the head coach. Next to him was Michael Morris, then Dan Horka, Jim Ernst, Tom DeWord, Bill Stewart, Casey Kenovan, Mark Matichek, Bill Conway, Kevin Finley, and then our trainers Dave McDermott, Tom Kaplan, and Scott Austin, who was Brad's older brother. So a few things I'd like to point out about this picture. This was the last year that they did a team picture outdoors, and you can see looking north down towards the dam, Morehouse Park, and then Bridge Street beyond that. And if you look at the picture here, we're basically a senior sophomore team, and in the front row the only person not a senior was Brad down at the other end, the other goalie. And in the second row, the only players who weren't underclassmen were Bill Stewart and Kevin Finley, and then Dave McDermott, one of the trainers. So it was a heavy laden team with sophomores, freshmen, and one junior, and the rest were seniors. So we expected a lot this year. You know, we had a lot of veteran leadership returning, and I'd been playing since my sophomore year, as had the line of Christo, Boke, and Pribble, so they knew each other really well. Whitty and Boakes have been playing since they were freshmen, and Horka and Casey had already played quite a bit when they were freshmen. So we expected a lot, and we knew who the good teams were: John Marshall, Farmington, and we hadn't heard much about Burnsville, but we found out they were going to be pretty tough. So this was a fun team, and probably one of the best teams that Owatonna ever produced. And this is a picture of the OHS B squad team that year, who went 16-0-1. So they had an incredible season, coached by Bill Ryden. And the players you can see here in the front row is Brad Austin, Tom Huberman, Brad Vogt, Jim Ernst, Kevin Finley, Bill Stewart, Craig Thompson, Wally Risberg, and the other goalie, Dudley Walters. And in back was the coach, Bill Ryden, Robbie Hardkoff, Steve DeLeitch, Chris Cashman, Gary Peterson, John Stroshine, Jeannie Gritz, and in this case, Dudley was assisting Bill to coach them. So that year, Owatonna had a combined team record of 34-4-1. So we had a lot of really great players, and both the A and the B squad. A lot of these B squad players went on to play their junior and senior years after we had graduated. So there was the pipeline was still full. Okay, this is back to that team picture, and every team has players with nicknames. So a lot of times they're just kind of a play on the players' last names, like Chesney went to Ches, Christo went to Cricko, Ole came from Olson, etc. Whitty came from Whitrock. But we also had some unique nicknames on this team, so I kind of wanted to go through that. So if later in this presentation, if I'm saying somebody's nickname, you'll remember who they are. So in the front row, there's me, Goonie McGough. Dan Boke gave me this nickname when I was in second grade. I still remember that when we were over at St. Mary's. And, I probably lived up to that nickname a few times in my life. So people know me pretty much all through high school and after that as Goonie. And then also in the front row, you had Gramps. Gramps was, he moved slow, and he wasn't the fastest skater, so we gave him a bad time and started calling him Gramps. Then Dan Horica was Cosmic. I'm not sure how he got that nickname, but that stuck with him for quite a while. And then Tom DeWord was Gunner, and if you saw his slap shots, you know why they nicknamed him that. And then Beezer was Bill Stewart. That's kind of a play on his name, but it's not real obvious. And then Bill Conway, nicknamed Gitch. I am not sure where that name came from, but everybody on the team called him by that. And then Kevin Finley was Fish. So a lot of great guys on there, a lot of fun. We gave each other a bad time, and we were a pretty loose group. So it was a great time playing with these guys. Not only were they great players, but they were a lot of fun to hang out with. As the coaches let us do our thing, and the managers joined right in. They were as wild as everybody else. So it was a great season. So I want to go through and just talk about each game and kind of give my thoughts on those. So I wanted to give a shout out to another pillar of Owatonna hockey, and that would be Bill Ryden. He was our first assistant coach. He came down with Dudley to coach. He came down out of the Northland and got a job teaching, and then became our assistant coach. So he was there the whole time I played high school hockey. And he's originally from Halleck, which is way up on the border with Canada, up in the area of War Road and Roseau. And he actually played in the 1957 state tournament, which Dudley was also at. Not sure if they crossed paths, but they may have seen each other and not known that they'd have a long history together ahead of them. And when he left Halleck, he went to North Dakota, and that's where he met up with Duds, and they played on the North Dakota Fighting Sioux teams back then in the early 60s. And then after he was playing and coaching with Duds up in East Grand Forks, I believe, and Duds moved on to Owatonna, and then right away contacted Bill and convinced him to move down there and teach and also be the assistant coach. So as I said, he became OHS's first assistant coach back in 1968. And he was one in charge of coaching the B squad, and he had an incredible record. I mean, in the 4 years that I was in high school, they had a 48-3-7 record in the first 4 seasons, so we were just dominant. I mean, a couple times they were undefeated the whole season. And he finally retired from coaching in 1977 with a record of 108, 78, and 7, which was a 57% winning percentage. So, and that second picture shows him at a couple years ago at the 50-year hockey reunion. So he's aged really well. He's looking good, and hopefully he's in good health and good spirits. So 1971 came in, and we were ready to start the season. A couple weeks before the season, before we got on the ice, we were allowed to start conditioning. I think it was probably the first week of November, and I remember we met a lot of times in the hallways, and we just do calisthenics for a couple hours, and start off with jumping jacks, squats, running, racing down the hallway. And Dud's always had this, what he called running in place, which I just hated that. It was basically an exercise where you squat down like you're going to start the 100-yard dash, and then you just run in place. Your thighs are already on fire after about 15 seconds, and Duds would keep us going. He's yelling at us. It always seemed like he singled me out. It'd be like, one more minute, come on, McGough, keep going there. And their goal was to make us the best conditioned team in the conference or in any game we played that year. And it paid off towards the end of the season. There were times where the conditioning became a big part of the game, and it definitely helped all those early season exercises. So anyway, this was a brochure that they handed out before the season, and it gave just kind of it showed our schedule here. So it started off pretty easy for us as far as the league goes. We had Albert Lee and Austin, our first two league games, which they usually weren't teams that you had to worry too much about. But then we played sandwiched around them. We had two games with the Lake Conference, Bloomington Jefferson and Hopkins Eisenhower. And then tough stretch right before Christmas with John Marshall and Burnsville. And then the Silver Bay Christmas tournament. And Duds had set up a game with St. Paul Park, so we were looking forward to playing them. And then once we got into the new year, then it was pretty much all conference until February when we played St. Thomas, and then finished it off with 3 more conference games. So we were looking forward to the season, and we thought, that we'd have a pretty good chance of being one of the top teams. And this kind of gives an idea about who was returning, an overview of what they thought the 71-72 season would be like. And then the Indian records and the awards and honors. At that time, there was only the Lee Hara Hockey Award, which was basically the MVP of the team. And I'll talk more about that at the end of this episode. So most of the team records were, the ones as far as scoring go were set the previous year. And so all the guys who set the records were coming back to play with us. So that looked pretty promising. And then we had, our defense. We had Bill Chesney, and Johnny Olson was coming back he broke his arm, and that had healed. And then Jeannie Gritz was coming back, and another defenseman, Horica, and then Casey Kenneman. So, and we'd heard there were some pretty good players on the Bantam, so we expected a lot. We had guys who had been through it, and hopefully this year we're gonna, it was gonna be our last hurrah for Owatonna and for the high school. So everybody wanted to do their best. So our first game was going to be against Albert Lee, as I said before. And Dud said that, we had been practicing every day except Sunday over at Shattuck for at least an hour. And that's where we're going to play our home games again. And he said in the interview that, the biggest problem was working with the new lines and the new sets of defense. So once everybody got used to each other, it was going to be a lot better. But it's going to take a little bit of time. We had a lot of new players on the team, and also new lines set up other than the first line of Boki, Christo, and Pribble. And it said we had scrimmage Hastings on Monday and Brady on Tuesday. I don't quite remember that, but I guess we did. And then this article showed the scoring stats from 70 and 71, and the top 3 scorers were all back for us, Boki, Christo, and Pribble, who accounted for quite a few points combined from the previous year. And then I was coming back. I'd played the majority of the games when I was a junior, so we were looked like a promising season. Sorry about that. I had something in my throat. It said Bokey was coming back. He was second in the league in scoring last year, and then Mark Christo was 12th. And it said I was back, had a 2.87 goals against average the previous year. So, and John Suchuk, I believe, had moved on, but he was another great scorer from Simley. And then it's talked about John Marshall last, and it said they had 5 of the league's top 20 scorers last year, and 4 of them are coming back. So they look to be really strong. So we always loved playing against John Marshall, and looked to be a pretty exciting season coming up. This is a picture of Shattuck's old barn where we had already played 3 seasons of home games there. And this was going to be our last official season over at Shattuck because they were in the process of building the 4-season center in Owatonna, and that's where obviously where all the home games would be played. This was a good old rink. I've talked about it before. The architecture was beautiful, I thought, inside. Not like the old barns like Aldrich Arena and Wakota, that were just kind of cookie cutter arenas. This was a really nice place. And I've often wondered what would have happened if they hadn't built this rink in '68. Would we have had a high school hockey team? Probably not. I think we might have been, it might have been put off for a few more years. So whoever had the money and thoughts to build that rink back in '68, I'd sure like to thank them on my behalf and also the behalf of the Owatonna's high school hockey program, because this is where we it worked out really well. We had all our home games here, and I'm sure Shattuck appreciated the money they were getting for ice time. And Johnny Olson and I were talking about Shattuck and just a little bit of their history, and he was wondering why or how they became such a hockey power back in the 90s and 2000s. So looked into it a little bit, and Wikipedia had some info along with Vintage Minnesota Hockey. They had a site there. So yeah, what happened was actually Shattuck had a program back in 1925, about the same time that Owatonna started theirs. And then they kind of fell on hard times. It used to be a military school, where a lot of probably rich, spoiled kids who didn't have much discipline were sent out there to, get a military education and learn a little bit of discipline. But in '72 they did away, or in '74 they did away with all the military part of the school and combined it with Shattuck and St. Mary's. So that's how it's known now, Shattuck St. Mary's. And they hired Craig Norwich, who had played in the NHL and I believe was an Edina graduate. And he was in charge of reestablishing this whole program because it had really fallen on hard times. When our B squad would play Shattuck's varsity back in the '70s, it was usually a routine drubbing by us on Shattuck. And so anyway, Craig Norwich established these centers for excellence and pretty much started the hockey program. And the hockey program, I mean, they've had some really famous alumni come through there: Jack Johnson, Zach Parisi, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Jonathan Taves. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so, I guess we're the first of the famous players to go through there. So, it's kind of funny to think back now that we played or Sidney Crosby and those guys played on the same ice that we did about 20 years earlier. But it was a good old barn, and I'm sure people enjoyed the drive over there. It gave them some time to kind of lubricate their throats and maybe pour some beverages down there to get worked up for the games. And it was pretty tough for opposing teams to win there. This picture shows Wally Risberg during practice, and it was before the Albert Lee game, so they were talking us up already at that point. And Wally Risberg, I played with him later on after high school. Played with him at Weber's Bar, and man, he was a really incredible player. Tall, gangly, tough to get off the puck, and really a tough player to play against. So this is how we would line up this year. Obviously, the forwards, the first line was Pribble, Christo, Bokey. Second line, Woody was going to center Casey. He'd played quite a bit when he was a freshman, so we knew what his potential was. And then we'd heard quite a bit about this young kid coming in, Bill Conway. And anybody that knows Owatonna's hockey history knows how great a player this guy turned out to be. Excuse me. And then Gramps would center the third line with Michael Morris and Mark Matichek. And this was pretty much the checking line. And Michael told me that he was being a sophomore, to be called up on the team, it was like being invited to your older brother's birthday party, where all of a sudden you're hanging out with the older guys that you kind of worshipped, from afar, and now all of a sudden you're a part of the group. So he had a great time that year, I think. Then on defense, we had Bill Chesney and Johnny Olson as one defensive pair. And then Tom DeWard was just going to start. He'd been in Bantams the previous year. And then Dan Hork had played quite a bit as a freshman, so we also knew what he is capable of. And then the goalies were myself. I'd played quite a bit the year before, and then Brad was going to back me up. So, Brad was an excellent goalie. You can, attest to that from his high school later on in his high school career and also his college career. So I knew if I faltered at all that I'd be watching the games from the bench and he'd be starting, and I didn't want to see that. He could have his moment in the sun after I left, but not during my senior years. So. And Doug Austin and I talked about this. That's one of the things. If you're a goalie, there's only one goalie on the ice at a time, and it really sucks if you're the guy watching from the bench. So I wasn't, and we both pushed each other. Brad made me a lot better goalie, and I hope he can look back and say, yeah, I helped him out. So it was a fun competition, and we had lots of good times. And then our reserves that year were Kevin Finley, one of the forwards, and Beezer is Bill Stewart on defense. And then Jim Ernst played, I think he played both forward and defense. So, and these guys, they didn't get a lot of ice time, but they practiced just as hard as everybody else. They put in all the time. They were very committed, very dedicated, and when they weren't playing, they were the loud cheerleaders, egging the team on and hoping for a win. So every team needs guys like this to, swallow their ego and just be a great teammate and do what they can. And, if Duds or Bill called on them, they were willing to do whatever needed to be done. So they were as much a part of the team as any other player on there. So our first game, we clobbered Albert Lee 12-1, and it was no contest. I mean, said Mark Christo opened the scoring with just 38 seconds gone in the game. So, I mean, it was just from that point on, it was just score at will. And said the Bokey Christo Pribble line figured in 10 of the 12 Indian goals, and Mark scored 7 goals himself, and Boke had 6 assists, which is still a school record, by the way. So it was just not much fun. When I was playing, I did not like games like this because you're pretty much watching the play down at the other end of the ice, and it said the only save I was forced to make was in the first period was where somebody just kind of tried to clear the ice and happened to put the puck on net. So it's no fun. And then they happen to get a lucky break, and somebody takes a great shot, and next thing you know, instead of 12-0, it's 12-1. So anyway, these weren't much fun to play in, but it was no contest. It was, and I'm sure, as people go through the record books, scoring records always seem to have either Albert Lee or Austin's name after it. So I'm sure if you went through Burnsville scoring records and John Marshall's and Farmington's, you'd probably find they all have scoring records set against either Albert Lee or Austin. So it was probably pretty tough to play on those teams where you're pretty much overwhelmed every game. But on this night, we just handed it to them as did most people did during that season. So before the game, we'd all skate out there, rah rah. People are screaming and cheering us on, and this must have been one of the early games because you can see there's not many people out there yet. And as the season went on, I mean, the number of people watching us increased. So anyway, we'd skate out there and get warmed up, and you always, a couple of times there, you'd have the pranksters like Whitty put a piece of tape on the bottom of my goalie skate. I didn't know it because I was putting my pads on, and he just kind of slipped it on there. And so when I hit the ice, this piece of tape just sent me flying. I was kind of running when I hit the ice and immediately started sliding across it. It was a little embarrassing. It was quite embarrassing, actually, and those guys, they all knew about it except me, and they just had a great time laughing at my embarrassment. So you always had to watch out for things like that. But this was always fun, skating out there, checking out, see who's there to watch you that night, maybe make some eye contacts with some of the cuter girls. So anyway, that's right before the game. And that year we had Whippy Wayne's Wailing Double Bass Blues Rock Polka Band playing at every home game, and these guys were just incredible. They added so much atmosphere to the whole experience of going to those games back then. And so I better name Whoopi Wayne was Wayne Peterson. He was a senior that year with us, and he had 15 other students. And so who did they have? It said Wayne handled the French horn. It said Bob Munson was on the drums, Tom Hochschild, Steve Nesseth, and Tim Nornis on the trumpets, Ken Teeters on the baritone, Keith Watchkey, Dan Hansen, and Tom Teeters on the trombones, Shelley Wall, Vicky Ebling, Sharon Schlobaum, Sue Janke, and Robin Casperson on clarinets, and Steve Partridge and Mark Olson on bass. So they really amped up the people, and it was a lot of fun to have them there, and they definitely helped us win some of those games, some of those close games later in the year. So, raise a toast to these guys. They were a lot of fun, and they put a lot of time and effort into doing this. I guess Sue Janke looks like she's in the picture there. She looks like she's playing the xylophone. And you can see Bob Munson's and the guy with the lighter stocking hat behind her, and then Wayne Peterson is the guy in the forefront playing the horn. So great bunch of people, and they really helped us out, as I said. So here's a picture of Boak. Even though we played at Shattuck, I guess we were considered the away team in that game. And it just shows him, in this 12-1 romp, he had 6 assists in the game, and he probably had a goal or two. So I guess he had 2 goals and 6 assists. So this was only the first of many games where these guys were just popping in goals. So our second game, we went up and played Bloomington Jefferson. I think we played at the Bloomington Ice Arena, and everybody was just off that night. I thought it was extremely hot in that place, after playing at Shattuck, and nobody had a good game, and we got routed 5-1. So we just kind of forgot about that game and tried to improve the next games. This is an article that was in the Owatonna Photo News, one of the weekly newspapers in Owatonna, and it was published December 9th, 1971. And it was an article about our captain, Dan Boeke, written by Jim Kane. And the title of the article is "A Player Must Have Discipline and Individual Flair." So this was a pretty in-depth interview about Dan. Had a lot of quotes by him. One, the first one is, hockey player must be highly disciplined, but he must also maintain individual flair. So he went on to comment that, like football, where everybody knows which way the play is going, who's blocking who. On the ice, it's a little more free for all, so you just have to kind of adjust and go with your instinct and kind of figure out where some of your line mates might be. And he talked about Albert Lee and Austin. He said, both of those teams are pretty weak right now and don't have a real track record of having a good hockey program in either of those cities. And he said the team to beat appears to be Farmington, but we weren't going to meet them until January 14th. So we had a lot of games between this time and when we would finally meet them. And he went on to say that John Marshall team has its problems. They got some good players, but they got a bad attitude and aren't very disciplined. So I guess he didn't go to the bland interview school where you just kind of never say something that's going to end up on somebody's bulletin board. So it's good to hear him be honest on his assessments of the teams. And he said, the Farmington Indian contest could be a real bruiser, and it's going to be tough, and maybe some guys might get a little heat and start throwing a couple of fists there. And he explained that duking, which was another word for fighting, wasn't worthwhile because the players involved will get thrown out of the game and they'd be barred from playing in the next league game. And Dan said he'd rather pass up revenge and keep playing a sport which he loves. And I found this quote pretty interesting. What I really like is scoring goals, but since I don't do that very often, I'd have to say that I enjoy the competition. And in hockey, there's a definite recognition of players since nobody's wearing they're wearing small helmets and no face guards to hide their faces. So, you want to make a good impression on them. But for him to say that he didn't score very many goals, well, I don't know what he's talking about, because that guy, what an incredible player. He, great passer, great shooter, and he would go on to have a good college career later on, which I'll talk about in another episode. And he said our team was having a pretty good season so far, and he said that we can be as good or better than last year's team if the sophomores play really good hockey for us, and we're depending on 5 of them to really come through. So they did come through in that season, and they really helped us out. So, and Dan said he wasn't quite sure whether he was going to play sports in college or whether he would actually be going to college right after high school. And he explained, he signed up because everybody had to sign up for the draft, but about a month after this, President Nixon came out and said that everybody, if they wanted to go into the military, it was going to be completely voluntary. So nobody was going to get drafted and have to go in. So that was a big load off our shoulders when that happened. And so it was actually a good interview, pretty in depth. Got into more than sports, and it showed that Dan was a pretty well-rounded guy there. In the picture, great looking guy, great athlete. Looks like he's contemplating something, and it almost looked like he's wearing an Austin football t-shirt when he's sitting on his couch there. So anyhow, I was real lucky to play with this guy. He was definitely made my life easier, and he was a great captain. And I'll tell a couple other stories about him further into this episode. So we played Austin on December 11th, and it was just another rout, and we beat him 10-0. And first line, Boki, Purple Crystal line. Mark got his second hat trick of the season, and I think Boakes had a couple goals. But there's a couple milestones in this game. Austin started his first game in the nets for the Indians. He'd already played a couple periods in some of the previous games. So he got his first start and had a shutout. It was against Austin, but still he had he had to stop every shot there. And this was just the first of the 7 shutouts that he would have during his high school career. And that's a record that still stands. He's, I think, tied with maybe Doug Boss, who played sometime in the 80s. And then it said that Michael Morris got his first goal as an Indian, and he would pop in. Let's see how many more. I'm looking at the sheet here. He would end up with a total of 31 goals, so that was the first of 31 for him in his high school career. And I also highlighted in the second column there, it talked about Mark Christo. It said he scored his first goal with just 22 seconds gone in the game. It said he picked up the puck behind the Owatonna net, skated the length of the ice, threw it around Austin checkers, and went in alone on Steve Scott, the Austin netminder, and beat him easily. So, Carl Sainert, the guy who wrote the articles for us, I thought he did a really excellent job on writing these articles. It wasn't just kind of a summary of who scored and how many shots were stopped. He got into in-depth analysis. He made sure everybody that scored had a little summary of that. And I mean, he was an excellent writer for us. It was almost like having a beat writer for our high school team that year. So, a good shout out to him. He was a great guy, great big bear of a guy, and really nice, and did an excellent job writing these articles. And the last thing about this is it said the Indian B squad had a 3-0 win over the Austin B squad. Sounds like the game wasn't quite a full, complete game, but Kevin Finley scored, and Brad Vogt and Chris Cashman got the other goals. So, here we were, 2-0 in our conference at this point, but we'd played the 2 weakest teams, so we were ready for some tougher competition after this. And here's a picture of one of our defensemen, Johnny Olson. He's carrying the puck up against Austin, and I believe he got a goal in that game. So he had 3 or 4 goals during the season, and a bunch of assists. So he was a solid defenseman. Not that big, but he knew how to hit. He wasn't afraid to hit, and he could put on a mean hip check. I saw one Rochester guy go head over heels after Johnny put a hip check on him. So it was fun having him out there on defense along with Bill Chesney. Here's a picture of Boak going in and shooting on the Austin goalie, and it looks like the Austin defenseman is just either cross-checking him or holding him or something, but I'm sure our forwards got used to that during this game. So it said Boakes had 2 goals, I guess only a goal in the third period, and it said we're going to face a tough Hopkins-Eisenhower team at Shattuck. So we're finally going to get into some stiffer competition here, see how well we would do. Here's another picture from our Austin game. This is a picture of Mark Christo, and says that he got another hat trick against Austin. And Mark was a fun guy to play with. Boy, he was what a center. I mean, between that line at Boki, Christo, Purble, I was always amazed. Some of the passes they made, some of the goals they scored. So they made my life easier, and they were great on defense. I mean, they back-checked. They weren't these guys that were just cherry-picking on the other end. They helped out defensively, and that really made a big difference for our team, especially when it got into some stiffer competition and the games were a lot closer. So this is a scene I kind of pictured Hopkins Eisenhower's locker room after right before they went down to play Owatonna at Shattuck. So here's the coach, and he says, "Okay, boys, listen up. Our next game is against Owatonna at Shattuck Arena." He looks at the guys down in the lower picture over there, and one guy says, "Owatonna, where's that?" And the other guy says, "Shattuck, oh crap, I've heard that place is worse than playing in Thunder Bay." So if you guys saw the movie Youngblood with Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, they always hated going to Thunder Bay. So anyway, I thought that was, just thought I'd throw that in there. And this guy says, "Owatonna, who cares? How good can they be? They're from southern Minnesota." And I think this was probably the mentality of a lot of people, north of us. Up in the cities or up in northern Minnesota, they thought anybody from southern Minnesota didn't know how to play hockey. So we were going to try to show them a thing or two when they came down and played in our barn. On December 14th of 71, Hopkins Eisenhower came down, and a lot of people had picked Eisenhower to finish high in the Lake Conference, possibly only second to Edina. And so we were going to play them and see how well we could do. And Duds always wanted to play some of these teams out of the cities because they always looked down on us, I think. There's a certain bias, like I said, about teams from southern Minnesota. So he finally talked their coach into coming down, and this was an incredible game. It was a lot of fun. The place was packed. I mean, after people figured out we had a pretty good team, they were just flocking to our games. And the article starts off, and it says, "OHS hockey fans were treated to one of the most exciting and well-played hockey games last evening that an Owatonna team has ever played. And we beat Hopkins Eisenhower 5-0. So that theme was, exciting games, well played, good periods. This was going to be a theme for the rest of the season, when Carl wrote these articles. So it was a scoreless tie going into the third period. And then Gunnar DeWord got us on the board with a little over 2 minutes gone in the final period. And right after that, it was like the floodgates opened because Boak made it 2-0 about a minute later on passes from Christo and Purble. And then Bill Conway got his first goal of his OHS career on an assist from Johnny. Says he put a perfect shot under an outstretched goalie. And Woody also assisted. And then we got a power play goal, and Christo scored that one on a pass from Boki, and then Boki finished out the scoring later on. So anyway, the first two periods, it says that I had 10 big saves and played one of my finest games in nets and made some very difficult saves throughout the game. So, there was a total team effort. Everybody was playing excellent defense, and we held them off. And it says in the second period they took the game to us, and you can tell I had 8 saves for that period, and the goalie for them only had 1. So they must have been down in our end quite a bit of the time. And then there's a quote that I highlighted here, or something that Dudley talked about. He said it had to be one of the most satisfying wins since he's been the Indian coach. And the defensive play by the Indians was excellent as they held the strong Ike scoreless. So, this was kind of our springboard to playing a lot better after we beat them. I think a lot of people sat up and took notice of our team. And it said that the B squad ended up 2-2 tie after they're leading 2-0, and it said Chris Cashman and Wally Risberg scored, and Brad Austin looked good in the nets. So our next game was going to be against John Marshall, back into the league that Friday against over at Shattuck. This is a program from before the John Marshall game, and I'm not sure where I got this, but you can see in the front row, he had Dan Campbell, Greg Johnson, Lee Powell, Craig Morton, Joe Mount, Ted Reynolds, Wes DeVries, and their coach Gene Sack. And in the back, he had Steve England, Tom Herzog, Rod Powell, Terry Just, Steve Letourneau, Jimbo Radke, Dan Christofferson, Mark Majorowicz, Brad Sutton, Terry Brown, and their manager Gene Rausch. So I always enjoyed playing against John Marshall. I mean, we had played these guys. It always seemed like in championship games when we were in Pee-wees and Bantams and, the previous years. So they had a pretty strong team the past couple of years, and JC managed to beat them in our second game, actually, as a high school team. So it was always a good slugfest playing these guys, and we had a lot of respect for them. And, they had I think they had 4 of the 5 top scorers from their previous championship team from the year before. And then there are 2 defensemen in the back row, Brown and Sutton. I mean, those guys were huge. You can see how they tower over everybody there. So it was going to be a fun game when they came into Shattuck and played us. So this was right before the John Marshall game, and I actually made it into the papers here, and it says McGough gets workout. So you can see I had my practice jersey on. You can see my mask. Hated that thing. And doing a kick out there. And big quote there, it says, I don't know why I ended up as a goalie. I guess it's just what I always wanted to be. So pretty deep thought there. Anyhow, I've talked to Doug Austin about this before, and playing goalie, you're still part of the team, but you're also an individual. So it's always you against the 5 other players that are trying to score on you. So it was I loved it. I mean, the more pressure that was on, it was a lot better. It was fun. Loved wide open games, and it was always fun to stonewall some of their big scorers, make a nice save and kind of see the frustration on their face. And when I played, I had to play with glasses. Couldn't afford contacts. And that presented some problems because they tended to fog up. Usually at the worst time. I don't think I let in any goals when they were fogged up, but boy, it was kind of tough. I'd have to keep skating, around the net or side to side just to kind of get some air blowing across the glasses to unfog them a little bit. So that was, my article in the paper for that season. And then the other article, it says, Indian Icemen expect to find John Marshall fighting mad. So talked about, it said they were in 4th place in Southern Minnesota Hockey League with a 1-2 record. And they started off, they had to play Farmington and Burnsville right off the bat. So they had 2 really tough games right off the bat, and they lost both of them. So, they were coming in there and they couldn't afford to lose again or they'd be out of it. And let's see, it said their last game they beat Albert Lee 10-1. And it said Jimbo Radke, Steve Letourneau, and Rod Powell did a major share of their scoring. So it was going to be a fun game. And you could see on the right side it showed the Southern Minnesota Hockey League standings. We had only played 2 games, so We only had 4 points. And then for scoring, Christo and Boki already had 17 points. Only, 4 games in, 5 games in. So they were doing pretty well. And so we were looking forward to a good game with John Marshall. Okay, this was another couple pictures and an article about our game with John Marshall. So on Saturday, December 18th, we had a picture of our top line, Boki, Christo, Pribble, and you can see him putting a hockey stop on there and letting some snow fly. And these guys were just a terror. They'd been playing together since they were sophomores, and they knew where each one was going to be, and they just it was a lot of fun watching them from the other end of the ice, because some of the passes and some of the goals that they got were pretty spectacular. So the first game with John Marshall, it says Indians crunched John Marshall 5-4, and I highlighted the first paragraph. It said, playing a game that left the fans wild in the stands, Owatonna's hockey team crunched JM 5-4 last night for first place tie in the Southern Minnesota Hockey League with Burnsville. And this was a fun game. It was up and down the ice the whole night, and we took a 3-0 lead in the first period. And Mark got the first goal with an assist from Boki, and then Boke got the second goal with an assist from Christo. And then Woody got our third one with an assist from Bill Conway. And it just said that, John Marshall had their chances, but weren't able to score, and we did. So we felt pretty good going into the locker room after the first period, and we're up 3-0. But boy, it sure changed in the second period, because before we knew it, they had tied up the game. And so Steve Letourneau scored right off the bat with an assist from Terry Brown, and then Brad Sutton got one probably from the point. And Jimbo Radke had one with an assist from Rod Powell. So it was a fun game. So going into the third period, we managed to get our fourth and fifth goals. And of course it was Mark scoring with this time an assist from John Olson. And then Mark got the last one too with an assist from Boki and Pribble. But we weren't done yet, because towards the end of the game, they punched one in and made it 5-4, and then it was just trying to hold them off until the end of the game, and we did. So it was a fun game against JM as usual. So next time we were going to play them, I'm sure it would be the same thing. These are a couple of pictures. The one on the left is obviously Johnny Olson, and you can see the color of our jerseys and pants and socks and everything, and the old skates, and he probably has a Northland or a Norcon stick there in his hand, and a little, standing up in front of the snowbank, probably down at Wierzinski Arena. And then the picture on the right shows Johnny and Mark Christo, and Mark's wearing the old Indians hockey jacket that we got. And you can see it's getting pretty broke in there. You can see the leather's getting some nice creases. Yeah, and this article from December 20th, 1971, it was in the sports section in the Minneapolis Tribune. And it was written by John Gilbert. He's a well-respected writer about hockey and for the Minneapolis Tribune. And he wrote an article about us and told, about how we had beaten Hopkins Eisenhower, and, did all this scenario about how they had beaten so-and-so and lost this and whatever. But, it said that we had beaten Eisenhower 5-0 and then beat JM 5-4. So we were ranked number 13 in the state at that time. And talked about Mark, Dan, and Chuck again, and how many points they already have, and talked about our youth program. It said we had 350 boys involved, and we had 9 seniors, 1 junior, 7 sophomores, and 1 freshman. and said that the top sophomore was a standout defenseman, Dan Horka, who was big and can move the puck. Yes, he could. So it talked about us resuming play against Burnsville, and they were 5-1, and we were going to play them Tuesday night. So said that game could decide the Southern Minnesota title, although Farmington hopes to have a hand in it. And then you can see all the rankings down at the bottom. No surprise, Edina was up there, International Falls, Southwest, Grand Rapids. The usual players there. South St. Paul was ranked 6th. They were in our conference. So if we wanted to get to the state, we were probably going to have to go through them. So that was pretty exciting to get this right up in the paper, in the big city paper about our hockey team. So on December 21st, we're going to get our first look at Burnsville, who had already beaten JM and I believe Farmington. So we knew these guys were tough if they had already beaten those two teams. And the previous year we had beaten Burnsville 6-1 and 7-1. So we weren't quite sure if things would be different this year. And said right away there was a fluke shot that instead of going behind the net, it bounced out front and went right to one of the guys from the Burnsville Braves, and he took it off my stick and passed it over to a guy who had a wide open net. So we tied it up a little bit later. Boak dug it out of the corner and passed it out front to Christo, who was all alone. I don't know why they would have left Mark all alone in front of the net, but he scored easily to beat Jerry Ross and tie things up. And then Bill Conway intercepted a puck about a minute later and slapped it past the surprised Brave goalie, it says. So it was kind of a goalie's duel after that between Jerry Ross and I, and it was a lot of fun. They had some great players. They had a guy named Mike Wong, big defenseman. He's like 6'3", and man, seeing him coming down the ice was not much fun. And they had some other guys, Holmquist, Bo, I forget. It was pretty much a junior team for them that year, so they would have their moment in the sun the following year. But this year we're gonna take it to them, we hoped. And Dud said that he was pretty pleased with the outcome, and he felt this 3-2 score, he thought we played a lot better. We dominated play and thought we were the superior team, but we missed too many scoring opportunities. And it says, although the Christo Boki Pribble line again dominated play for the Indians, it appears that the other two lines are developing quite rapidly and are now giving the Indians a more balanced attack. And it said all three lines are doing an excellent job of forechecking and moving the puck up the ice. And I'd like to add that they also were excellent back checking and blocking pucks. And if I told them they were screening me in front, they moved out of the way and gave me a clear look at the shots. So we had we were committed defensively as well as being able to put the puck in the net. And it says the B squad started slow and finished strong, and they had an easy 7-2 victory over Burnsville. And said Chris Cashman had a hat trick, Wally Risberg got a couple, and then John Stroshine and Kevin Finley got the other ones. So the next week we'd head up to play in the Silver Bay Invitational Hockey Tournament again. And for the second year, we had won it the previous year, so we were going up there as the defending champs and hope to bring home the trophy again. This is an article that was in the Magnet, which was the OHS school paper, and it was put in there December 22nd, right for Christmas time. And it said we're going, the hockey team, to defend Silver Bay Championship. And in the picture it shows Mark facing off against JM there in the picture. And this is just kind of a rehash of our previous two games, and it looks like they interviewed Bill Ryden quite a bit here. And it said, I had to pay him a lot of money to say these quotes. It says, goalie Steve McGough had a very, very good game in the nets, and the team played well except for the last 5 minutes in the first period. they had some trouble with penalties and a few other situations. And then in the last column there, it says, talked about the Eisenhower game and how we got a shutout, and it said it was his best game in the 3 years of high school hockey he's played for us. So, yeah, Bill, thanks for those quotes, man. That was pretty nice of you. And it was a total team effort. If I was stopping shots, it's you know, I was facing in practice every day the Bokey, Christo, Pribble, Horica, Gunner, all those guys, and so when we played some of these other teams, I mean, if I could stop those snipers in practice, then I was probably going to have a good chance of stopping the snipers on the other team. Not always, but a lot of the time. This is an article that was in the Owatonna's People's Press on Christmas of 1971, and it talked about us going up to defend our Silver Bay championship. And that year there would be Minnetonka, another Lake Conference team, Duluth Proctor, and the host Silver Bay. So we were going to meet Silver Bay again, and Silver Bay, we beat them last year 8-1. So they were probably hoping for a different result this year. And I just highlighted some of the things in this article that I think some of the people following hockey in Owatonna will might find interesting. And Carl said this following is a tribute, about the people going up to Silver Bay and watching. He said a large delegation of parents and fans are expected to attend the event despite the distance, up there above Duluth. And he said this following is a tribute to Bill Carlson, the athletic director at Silver Bay, and to the people of Silver Bay. And we talked about how the people were very nice and their hospitality was great. And it said the tournament was run by Bill Carlson, who is one of the warmest, friendliest persons you can meet. His tournaments are always well run, well organized, and every fan comes away feeling wanted and welcome. So, and Duds went in there and he said, we feel quite strongly about a tournament like this. We think the boys being together a couple of days get to know one another that much better, and it's great for team unity, team spirit, and everything else, camaraderie. So, and then at the end, the last paragraph I highlighted, he said he also has been stressing defense strongly as he feels that at times the team tends to be too offensive minded and sometimes starts to break out of the zone before they control the puck, leaving men open and alone in front of the net. And he hoped these things could be overcome and confident that they would. So Bill Carlson, I'm sure after Silver Bay, they were like, we don't want Owatonna to ever show up here again, because we whooped their hometown team last year 8-1, and then Bill Carlson was going to end up going down to Owatonna to run the new Four Seasons center. So they were probably happy to, see us go and not come back there after we pounded them so bad and stole their athletic director. But that was a couple years in the future, or maybe a year. This was an article in the Magna written by Brian Hansel, and he just talked about the hockey team we were going up to play in Silver Bay, and talked about the teams. And yeah, he said when Owatonna gets their own hockey arena, then they would put on the same type of holiday tournament. So, and that would happen the following year, but this year it was up to Silver Bay again. So we loaded up the bus and had the music rocking and rolling, and somebody brought along 3 Playboys, new Playboys. I won't mention who, but if you were on the team, you probably knew who that person was. And so those were passed around. I mean, Playboys at that time were, pretty much unknown to us, and well, we knew about them, but we'd never seen very many of them. So those magazines didn't get a lot of downtime during that trip. And, the articles, they were pretty well written on top of it. So anyhow, it was a fun ride up there and back. And this was another article that came out on December 27th, and it just was the weekly rankings of all the teams, and we'd moved up one place to 12th place in the state, so we were still doing pretty well. The reason I wanted to highlight this, the title of the article is Region 7 Sixes Look Impressive. And it talked about Virginia up there on the Iron Range, and it said, when the game started, left wing Jack Carlston roared in and scored for Virginia 8 seconds into the game. And Jack Carlston didn't get any more goals, but his brother Jeff and Steve did all right. And then it says Steve centers the all-brother line and got 3 goals, while Jeff got 2. And the coach Gus Hendrickson, no, I guess coached by the brother of Grand Rapids coach Gus Hendrickson. The coach of Virginia was Dave Hendrickson. And he said Jack and Jeff are both seniors, although they're not twins. And Jeff is about 6'3", while Jack and Steve, who is a junior, are both 6'2.5". So, you didn't want to mess with those guys. And later on, they became the Hanson brothers in the movie Slapshot. I believe, I can't remember which, one of the brothers was not here, and they had to have another guy fill in whose actual name I think was Hanson. And here I said, we're putting on the foil. It's old-time hockey. So I thought that article, finding out about these guys back when they were high school was pretty interesting. Hope you guys have a little chuckle out of that. And this article, we won our first game up at the tournament. It said Iceman slam past Silver Bay. So we beat them 8-0. And so we're going to go into the championship game against Minnetonka, who beat Duluth Proctor 7-1. And Carl said the game featured a strong, well-balanced attack by the Indians, and all 3 lines looked good and all took part in the scoring. So that was great. And said I played another excellent game as I got the shutout, and we thought they'd provide a much tougher test. So it was actually only 1-0 after the first period, but the second period ended with a 6-0 lead. And it's just the usual Boki, Christo, or Pribble scoring or giving assists. And it said, I just highlighted this paragraph in the second column. It said, Horka finished the scoring for the period on a brilliant effort while the Indians were shorthanded because of a hooking penalty by DeWord. And it said Horka carried the puck the length of the ice, faked out a defenseman, and went in alone on the goalie and scored easily. So he was that type of player, man. He was a really great defenseman. In fact, in hockey records, he's still the all-time leading scorer for a defenseman. So we got used to seeing his stuff that year, what he could actually do, and it was good. So we slid down in the rankings, and even though we had a better record than the previous week, we slid down to number 15, and we're tied with Matamidi, and they were, I think, 9-1. But that was our the last time that we showed up in these rankings. And one thing I forgot to mention is these rankings were only for the public schools back then. They had a separate state tournament for all the Catholic and private schools. So you wouldn't see Hill Murray in here. Back then they had Duluth Cathedral and I think St. Cloud Cathedral. There were quite a few Catholic high schools throughout the state, and some of them had some incredible players on them. And so I just wanted to bring that out. So that's why you don't see, some of the perennial Blake, what are some of the other ones that, the Catholic schools and everything, but didn't see them back then. So we took on Minnetonka in the championship game of this Christmas tournament and ended up losing 4-1 to these guys. And said we had plenty of scoring opportunities, but their goalie Jay Donahue made a lot of brilliant saves, so just didn't have it that night. And they managed to get a goal right at the end of the first period, and it said they scored as a buzzer sounded, and our coaches protested, but the goal was still allowed. So we couldn't get it. Didn't have much puck luck that night, so it was just another loss. Only our second one that year, and it's actually a second loss to a Lake Conference team. So it was a little tough to lose these guys. I think with a couple little breaks, we might have made it a closer game. So for our last game of 1971, we played St. Paul Park, and we had never played them before. And this was one of the teams that Dudley kept trying to get down there. And finally, they came down and to play us. And it said the Park team was surprisingly big and fast, and were able to break out on the Indians probably as well as any team had been able to do that year. So even though their win-loss record wasn't that great, they were a very strong, solid, fast-skating team and were able to lead the Indians most of the way. So only a 2-goal rally late in the third period saved us and gave us the victory. And it said their goalie, Mike Monahan, had a really good night and made it tough for us to score. So the first period, they went up 1-0. We were shorthanded. It said I had made the initial save, but Parks Cornwell tapped in the loose puck before I could smother it. And then it said the second period, we had a lot of shots on Monahan, but in fact 26 of them. And he had to make 10 saves. And at the bottom, you can, in the second column, a little bit is torn off there, but it talks about Casey Kennevan. And it said he tied it up in a brilliant effort. He took the puck in the corner, fought the Park players for it around behind the net. And just as it appeared they had him stopped, he rifled a hard backhand into the wide side of the net. Then it said he made another beautiful play at the end of the period, and he said he faked a defenseman off his feet at the blue line and skated in alone on the goalie, who in turn was faked to the ice. But then he scored, but the buzzer had already sounded. So that was typical Casey. Boy, that guy, when he him and his brother Pat were just, as I probably said before, were just incredible stick handlers. And Duds was very happy with this. He said the second period was probably the best period we'd played all year, and we were only able to get one goal. And then he said the game could only be described as a real barn burner. So in the third period, about 6 minutes left, Chuck Pribble finally got a goal there and tied it up at 2. And then in the third period, it said it appeared the game was headed for a tie, but then Woody was in on a breakaway and got pulled down, and they gave him a penalty shot. So Woody had made the first and only penalty shot back when he was a freshman against John Marshall, and it was our only goal in that game when we lost 7-1. And so here he was making an attempt at scoring on his second penalty shot, and as far as I know, he was the only guy who had penalty shots for a number of years, but this time he wasn't able to put it in. So back then, if you didn't score on the penalty shot, you were still awarded a penalty. And so Park probably regrets that, because Boak dug the puck out of the corner, put it right out to Mark, and said it took his time and drilled it into the corner of the net. And Charlie Pribble assisted on that one. So we pulled out that one. It was a close game. It was a great game, and anytime we could beat a team out of St. Paul, we were happy. And it said the Indian B squad upped their record to 6-0-1 when they beat their B squad and won the game 2-1. It said Kevin Finley, Paul Adamson scored the first goal, and then Chris Cashman put the game away. So At the end of the story, it says we were going to scrimmage the OHS alumni, and then our next game in the new year would be against Rochester Mayo. So this was a good way to close out 1971. You know, we had a past couple of weeks we'd won some pretty good battles, and we're having a good season so far. So on to 1972. This picture shows Rick Whitrock and Casey Kenovan in one of the pictures that was in the Owatonna People's Press after we beat St. Paul Park back at the end of December. And let me talk about these two guys. Woody was a senior that year. He was one of our alternate captains, and you can see there he's got his Christian Brother stick. And Woody was he was a gritty guy. He was willing to go into the corners. He was, the guy that grinds it out and everything like that. Maybe not the fastest skater, but he was a wily guy. And when we were in Pee-wees and Bantams, he was always one of the better guys. And, he was way ahead of everybody else, and he was our enforcer. So, if somebody needed to be hit or whatever, Woody was the guy you wanted. So, and Casey was just unbelievable. That guy could stick handle we had some incredibly slick stick handlers on our team, but I think Casey was probably right at the top of them. Just unbelievable. And you can see he liked to put a lot of tape on his skates. You can see Woody has none, a little bit around his shin pads, but Casey, if Earl Bruin, the athletic director, ever walked into our locker room over at Shattuck and saw the tape that we went through, he would probably have cringed, wondering about how the budget was going to pay for all that. But these were two good guys, and Woody was the center with these young studs, Casey on one wing and Bill Conway on the other. So he had it pretty good. This is a picture of Bill Conway shooting on the St. Paul Park goalie. And let me talk about Bill Conway. Talk about a natural. He showed up in Owatonna about 3 years earlier and came down to the Warzinski rink with a pair of skates that none of us had seen before. Had really long blades, and found out they were speed skating skates. And Bill had grown up doing speed skating, never played hockey in his life, I guess. And he soon picked up a stick and started playing in Bantams. And then when he was a freshman, he was good enough to be on our team. And this guy was just, he ended up becoming the leading goal scorer of all time at OHS, and just a natural. He was unbelievable. And then in college, the following year when he was a sophomore, all the records, all the scoring records that Boki and Krista would have this year would just be shattered by him. So we'll talk about him more later on in these episodes. So about Christmas time, this song, American Pie, came out, and this became our song. Everybody knew the chorus. It was "Bye Bye Miss American Pie, drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys who were drinking whiskey and rye, singing this'll be the day that I die." So we had guys that would sing different verses of the song, and we'd all join in on the chorus. So this was a pretty popular song, easy to sing along with, and kind of a good time song to sing along to. So into 1972 we go, the year I graduated from OHS. And you think about that time, and I think we hit a real sweet spot in history there. If we had been born 5 years older, like a lot of us had older brothers, we would have had to worry about going to Vietnam. But that was pretty much over, and things looked pretty rosy for the future. So, and we had some great music. It was probably 71, 72. that was kind of I think some of the best all-time rock music produced. Others may disagree, but it was a great time to be alive. And our first game that year was against Mayo, and Mayo was they didn't seem to have the rink rats that John Marshall had, so they were not quite as strong as the Rockets over at JM. But they were you never knew about these guys, so it said right away it said Mayo's only goal in the game came within minutes of the start on a power play. So again, we're started off behind. I don't know what it was, but we just started off slow in a lot of games and ended up giving up a goal. So we had to fight back a lot of times from being behind. And it said Horka slammed in a shot to score from the Spartan blue line. It said the shot came so fast it was in the net before the Mayo goalie knew what had happened. So a good description there I assume by Carl. And let's see, Whitty scored that game, and also Kenovan. So we had a lot of scoring, and they weren't getting much offense there. So at the end of the two periods, the score was already 6-1, and then Brad replaced me in the net. So it's kind of fun sitting on the net when you're that far ahead, and we ended up winning 7-1. And Brad and I only had to make 13 stops in the game, while the Mayo's goalie had to make more than twice that. So we were pretty good we were still undefeated in the conference and ready to move on. So on January 11th, we played Simley and beat them 6-1. And this was just typical game. We just poured on the offense and kept them from scoring. And I just highlighted a few things here. It said, the first highlight in the second column, it said we took a 1-0 lead when Whitty came up with the puck in front of the Simley net, but he was surrounded, so he passed it back to Conway, who was about 20 feet away, who took his time and put a perfect shot into the net. So goalies, we're going to see a lot of that in the next 3.5 years from Conway. Then it said in other highlight, it said Casey took the puck on one side of the net, skated around behind it, and stuffed it in the other side before the Simley goalie could recover. And Casey was just deadly at these wraparound shots. I mean, he's probably scored quite a few goals like that, but he'd kind of come in at the goalie, kind of fake like he was going to shoot, and then veer off and come around the net. And he had that long reach, and he just, before the goalie could get over to the other side, it was usually in the back of the net. And it said the highlight of the period occurred late in the period when the Indians killed off a penalty to Owen for holding. And Simley never got a shot on net and only had the puck briefly twice. So we were doing a pretty good job of dominating there. And then it said in the third period, late in the period, they managed to hold Simley in their own zone for over 4.5 minutes. So it was pretty amazing. And then it said Brad replaced me for the final period. So he was getting lots of experience, and their next game was going to be against Farmington. So Farmington only had one loss, and we knew they were going to be tough, and we wanted revenge because they had beaten us 3 times the previous year. So Farmington came down on January 14th finally, and Boak had a hat trick that night, and we played really, really well defensively, and we ended up beating Farmington 3-1. So we're still unbeaten in the conference, and it said that Boakey picked up 2 goals right away. He intercepted a Tiger pass and carried the puck to the length of the ice, and he went wide around the defenseman and then slapped a hard backhand into the pads of Hunter, which bounced off them into the net. And then 38 seconds later, we got another one when Chuck Pribble picked up the puck, fed it ahead to Christo, who carried it down the ice, and Mark passed across the ice perfectly onto the stick of Boki, who put it in the net to make it 2-0. So, I was trying to do my best to hold Farmington off. They had some really good players. Their goalie Dave Hunter, I thought, was by far the best goalie in our conference that year. It became a real, when I'd look at him making saves down at the other end, then I'd say, okay, he made that save. Let's see if he can top this. So, there's a competition between the goalies, even though we weren't, shooting on each other. But we're doing our best to keep our teams in the game. And Boak got the third goal I believe in the third period, and faked Hunter out of the net and left it wide open for his backhand. So they were a lot of fun to play against. I just didn't like those guys. And Carl said Farmington came into the game built as a strong defensive team and a strong skating team, but at the end of the game, Owatonna stood out as the team that had the excellent defense, and they outskated the Tigers all evening. So then it said in the goaltending department, Steve McGough turned in an outstanding performance, outshining the highly rated Dave Hunter, who also had a good game. So I was happy to get the victory, and everybody played great, and to beat Hunter, well, that was an individual victory, I guess. And Dudley called it a big win, stating that the team came up with a supreme effort. So here we go again. He said he called it one of the finest games Owatonna team has ever played, and called Boak's play magnificent, and believed it was probably Dan's best game. So that seemed to be a common theme every game. Duds was like, oh, I've never seen a better period or a better game played by these guys. So we're doing well, and we're still undefeated in the conference. And our next game was going to be against Simley again, who we had just played. And the Indian B squad won 1-0. Steve Finley probably Kevin Finley, got the only goal with an assist from Chris Cashman. So that was a fun game, very exciting, lots of people there. And, we stepped up playing and beat them, which was a really good feeling. This is a picture of Whitty and Casey trying to score against Farmington. This is another article written by Jim Kane for his teen scene, and that was published in the Owatonna Photo News on January 20th of 1972. And the title of the article is Time for Just Hockey, Studies, Sleep, and a Girl. And this is another in-depth interview about Mark Christo. And so, I'm not going to go over everything that was written in the interview, because need to move on with this presentation. But you could see that he was a serious guy and definitely thinking about his future and what he was going to do after he graduated from high school. So, and as we'll talk about later, he did very successful in life. This is another article that was published the same day as Mark's interview. It was in the Photo News, and it talked about the first line of Christo, Boki, and Pribble, and how many points they already had, and they were the top three scorers already in the Southern Minnesota Hockey League. So they were doing really well. And then they talked about the upcoming regional tournaments, and Dud said that the South St. Paul Packers had three solid lines, and they would be a tough one to beat, and he felt that they'd probably be ranked number one. And then it talked about us beating Eisenhower and some scenarios there. So he thought we matched up really well, even though we had dropped out of the rankings at that point. So, and his first priority, it said, was for us to become the champions of the league, and then after that we'd worry about the regional tournament. So our next game was against Simley, and I believe John Suchuk, their big stud from the previous years, had moved on, went over to South St. Paul to play. And it said Dud said Simile was young, starting mostly sophomores and juniors, so they were probably good a couple years after that. And it said their strategy was to take a lot of long shots and then try to outskate the opponent to the puck. That wasn't going to work very well with us. So, and then he said the last two paragraphs said at the beginning of the year that defense was cited to be one of the Indians' weak points. But Coach Otto said it was coming on strong and said our defense has looked very impressive thus far with Horka and Olsen playing outstanding and Chesney and DeWard also looking quite impressive. On January 11th, we played Simile and beat them this time 4-0. And it said it could have been a bigger rout, but only excellent goaltending and a tight defense held the score down. And this was probably one of the only games of the season where either Boak, Mark, or Chuck didn't score. And so the second and Mike Morris scored, Mark Matichek and Casey, and then Kevin Finley got a goal, his first goal of the season. And it said in the second period, I didn't even have to make a save the whole period. And then the final period, most of the 9 saves I made were long-range shots, so it was just the opposite for Dave Pilot. He said most of the stops were close in and very difficult saves. And I highlighted this at the bottom of the third column. Excuse me. It said a real highlight of the game would have to be Kevin Finley's goal. Kevin is a senior who hasn't had a great deal of playing time, and the entire team was happy to see his goal. And that I remember that was Kevin and Beezer and Ernie, they put in all the work, all the hard work, all the dedication. They never missed any of the practices. They were great teammates, and they didn't get a lot of playing time, but they were on the bench cheering us on, and if Duds called on them, they were ready to go and make a contribution. So every team needs players like that, and they didn't have the egos and make a scene. They just were great teammates. This is a picture showing Whitty, and he's trying to jam the puck in the net, and then you got Gitch right in the center of the picture, and then Casey off to the right. And Casey scored a goal in this game, and you can see Whitty, he was always around the net. He was, like I said before, a real gritty player, and it looks like he had to tape the front of his left skate there. Maybe the toe kind of broke in a little bit, so the hope was to put on some tape and kind of try to bring it back to its original shape. So if you got a slap shot dead on, it wouldn't hurt your toes. And you can see Casey, I talked about the amount of tape he used. You can see it again, he's got it pretty much from his ankles halfway up his calf there. So I was always amazed when how much he used, and and then as soon as they took it off, and then people start throwing the balls, the clumped up balls of the used tape over at their teammates. The title of this article is Indian Hockey's Success Hinges on Game Attitude. And Duds was talking about we weren't able to just rely on our first line. We needed the second and third lines to be part of the scoring balance, and they had, later in the season they really started doing that. And it said what impressed Otto most about his team's recent play is that in the last 5 games they've only given up 4 goals. So that's pretty good. You're going to win a lot of games when you're only giving up a little over, or in fact less than 1 goal a game. On January 20th we played Albert Lee and beat them 4-1. Brad started this game, and it said we opened the scoring when Horka skated through several Tiger defensemen to tip in the Indians' first goal. And then it said the Albert Lee Tigers seemed content at playing the brand of hockey where the puck is dumped into the opponent's zone, followed by a fast scramble. So that was their method of trying to score. And said they got a goal when guy took a slap shot, and just one of those that, you said it got past Brad, and that's one of those where you just kick yourself in the butt and wonder how it ever made it past. But every goalie has games like that, and goals like that happen. So you just gotta kind of laugh at yourself and move on. And said Boki picked up the puck in the Owatonna zone and charged down center ice for the Indians' second goal. And then Cristo scored, and I'm not sure who else, but the Owatonna B squad beat Albert Lee 11-1. And then on the right two columns, you can see that we're 8-0 in the conference at this point. We had scored 50 goals and only allowed 10. And you can see poor Austin, they only had one goal the whole season. Oh man. And Albert Lee wasn't much better. Well, I guess they were. They had 13 goals. So, and it showed the Southern Minnesota Hockey League leading scorers, and Cristo and Boki were right at the top, 25 and 24 points. And then Chuck Pribble was a little further down. And this green guy from Mayo, I don't remember him, but he was in third place. And then he had a bunch of guys. Nowitzki, he was a great player from Farmington, and then Wong Holmquist. And it said that Farmington had only let in 6 goals in 9 games, so they had a 0.65 goals against average, and we had let 10 goals in 8 games, so we were not bad, 1.25 goals against average. And you can see that the goals scored by periods, we got most of our goals in the third period, but it was pretty balanced there. 22 in the first period, 19 in the second, 27 in the third. And we gave up 7 goals in each period, so we were obviously consistent there. And you can see our goals against average for league games was 1.3, and for all games 1.6. So we were doing pretty well defensively. We had a great team. You can see all the shutouts in the 1-goal game, so everybody is determined to play great defense. This is a picture. You can see all the spectators behind. At this point in the season, we had a lot of fans showing up over at Shattuck. And there's Bill Conway. It says Kevin Owen, but it's actually Bill Conway. They're trying to score, and Woody's right behind him. This article says that the Indians face Farmington in a must game. So Farmington had recently lost to John Marshall 3-2, so they had at least 2 losses in the conference, and they knew if they lost another time they'd be out of it with no chance at all. And Duds was a little concerned that we hadn't had practice for a couple of days because of a recent snowstorm, and he said he had wanted to work on the power play a little bit. He said we were getting moving it around fairly well, but we weren't getting a lot of good scoring opportunities. And then it said, he wanted to make us skate because that was part of our style, to just be on all over these guys. And it said we were going to play at Wakota Arena, which was Farmington's home arena. And it always seemed warm in that place. And, the ice was a little bit slower, so we're going to see what happened. Hope for the best. And we got our butts handed to us by Farmington, and they beat us 5-1. Everybody was off in that game. I mean, it was a terrible game. And our only goal was scored by Johnny Olson. He said he took it on the other side of the blue line. It just kind of skipped and took a bounce and eluded Dave Hunter, so I'm sure Dave Hunter is a little upset about losing a shutout like that. But it was terrible, and we played bad, and everybody knew it, and we just wanted to forget about it. But I thought it might have been the Farmington game the year before, but Johnny Olson thinks this might have been the game where Duds took us into the locker room after the game and slammed one of those huge doors, for the locker room. Those things are solid wood and must weigh, quite a bit. And he slammed that thing so hard that everybody thought the thing was going to come off the hinges. And he laid into us. So after that, we definitely improved and didn't have any more crummy games like that. This article says Iceman freeze out Austin 4-0, and that's a pretty apt title because it was so cold. It was well below zero, probably closer to 20 below, and everybody was frozen. They couldn't wait to get into the warming house between periods, and when it finally ended, we had beat them, and I watched most of the game from the other end, so it was just agony, just waiting there and counting the minutes until we could go get warm. Excuse me. And before the game, I think Brad might have been scheduled to start this game, and all of a sudden somebody pulled up in the car and got out, and they said Dudley Walters, who was scheduled to start the B Squad game, had been hit in the head and knocked out. So they packed up Brad, fully dressed, and put him in the car and took him to the other rink in Austin where he played. And this article also said that Farmington, which had beat us 5-1 a couple nights before, lost to Burnsville. So that was their second defeat. So I thought they had 3 defeats, but I guess they only had 2. So they had lost to Burnsville 3-2 in overtime. So everybody was happy when this game was done and could get on the bus and go home and get warm. This article is titled Iceman Spoiled Tommies in Overtime, and starts off by saying Chuck Purble tipped in Tom DeWard's shot a minute and 15 seconds into overtime to give us a 6-5 victory over St. Thomas Academy. And those guys would combine a couple weeks later for another spectacular goal in overtime, but don't want to get ahead of myself here. And Mark Christo got a hat trick, and Boki and Chuck Purble each got a goal. So, and Casey picked up the other tally. And it said we started off, we only needed 16 seconds to score. It says Dan Horka, after we got the face off, took the puck at the blue line, passed ahead to Christo in front of the net, and he backhanded it in. And then St. Thomas scored a couple minutes later when Boak was off on a penalty. And then he made up for it when he scored a goal. So it was back and forth, and it says Mark put the Indians back into the lead with just 1 second left in the period when he took a pass from Johnny, skated the length of the ice around 3 Tommies, and then beat the netminder with a perfect shot. The goal was contested by the Tommies coach, but it was ruled that time had not run out. So pretty amazing goal there by Mark. And then I got pulled in this game. I was, at the end of the game, I couldn't have stopped a beach ball, I don't think. It was terrible. So Dud saw that, and I think there was only a minute and 16 left in the game. Or that was the second period, sorry. And so Brad went in, and he played really well and, saved me, but it was... you feel kind of humble when they're pulling you off, and everybody's watching you, and you're the main focus, and you're not feeling too good about your night. So luckily he played really well, and then Purble and DeWard combined to give us the victory. And Dud was happy. He said Brad played well in the third period, and Mark Christo had an excellent game. So that was the nice thing. Brad could come off the bench and play just as well as I could, and it really helped out knowing that. This article says we had 3 games remaining, all league games, and if we won, we'd be the champions. But Burnsville was right behind us with a 9-2 record, and our next game is going to be against JM, and they had an 8-3 record, and they hadn't lost since they lost to us the last time, so I'm sure they were looking for revenge. And then it talked about Chuck Purble scoring the overtime winner. And let's see, Cristo had 24 goals and 14 assists at that point. And so he was having obviously a great year. And it talked about the B squad that won 4-0, and they now had a 12-0-1 record. And if you look at the standings here, you can see, we're on top, and then Burnsville, and then JM and Farmington. Okay, they had 4 losses, so they weren't doing quite as well as I had thought they did. And so, we were ready for the next 3 games. On February 4th, we went over to Rochester and played JM in our rematch game over at Graham Arena in front of about 1,500 fans, many of them which were from Owatonna. And we beat JM 3-2 that night. And they outshot us for the game, but we managed to keep them off the scoreboard. And these were the games that I really liked. It was up and down, a lot of action. You're not spacing out thinking about what's going down at the other end. They were on us all night long. So the first period was, they got a goal about 8 minutes in. And the second period, Duds described it as our best period of hockey that year. And Casey evened up the score on an assist from Conway, wrapped it around again, and then Boak put us ahead with an unassisted backhand shot goal. So at the end of the second period, we're up 2-1, and then right away in the third period, we went down 2 men and managed to kill off the power play. And then right after that, Horica scored from the blue line to put us up 3-1. But JM wasn't done. They scored a goal with about minute 14 left. And it was just nip and tuck until the time ran out. So we're happy to get out of there with a win. And you can see the 2 pictures there. I finally made the picture there, or the paper. And you can see back then I had a silver tooth. I had gotten my tooth knocked out playing baseball when I was catching, and had this silver cap on top of it. So looking back, it was pretty distinct, but also kind of goofy looking. So, but it did its job for a number of years. This is an article from the Rochester Post-Bulletin, and it gives a summary of the game we played, and it said they had a 9-game winning streak, and we ended up beating them. So John Marshall was 9-4, and they only had Austin to play. So Mark Cristo is quoted as saying, "We just beat the number 2 team, our toughest opponent of the season, and this is one we really needed for the title." And then Boak said, "John Marshall is a much improved team from the last time we played them." So that line scored a goal, but it was again a couple sophomores that ended up getting us the victory there. And their coach, Gene Sachs, says we missed our opportunity early in the third period when we were down 2 men. And it took something out of us not to score under those circumstances, he said. And said we outshot him again. It was just like the first game. And so, our defense held up. And at the end of on the last column there, it says Owatonna coach Dudley Otto said several colleges have indicated interest in Cristo and Boakey. So they would end up going on to play college, and I'll talk about that in a future episode. This picture shows myself, and that's Mark Cristo. It says that was Bill Conway, but that's definitely number 9, Mark Cristo there. And it says Steve Letourneau was chasing him. I'm not sure. Yeah, they probably is Letourneau, and they didn't know it then, but they would become teammates on the Dixie line, along with Dan Boakey, and be the first players from southern Minnesota to actually play for Bemidji State. And they went on and had great college careers up at Bemidji State, which I'll talk about later on. 4 days later, on February 8th, we played Rochester Mayo over at Shattuck, and we managed to get out of there with a 4-2 victory over them. And this was a really tough game. We just had a hard time breaking them down, and And it said the first period was scoreless, as it appeared we were feeling each other out. And then we dominated the second period, unleashed 37 shots at Scott Abold, and Mayo only had 7. So it said 4 of the 5 saves came in early in the period, so they had their opportunities, but we managed to keep them off the scoreboard. And then the third period, Duds had told us go out there and just start shooting because we needed to score some goals. And Casey finally got a goal for us. Said he took the puck at center ice, skated in on the net, was forced outside by the defense, and then shot from behind and to the side of the net. And so it hit some skates and bounced into the net. And that really got us going. And then Mark dug the puck out from the corner and passed it out to Pribble. And he scored on a perfect shot high into the net on the goalie's far side. So that seemed to wake us up, and then they got a goal back. And a minute later, after they scored, we got another goal. And actually 2 goals in 8 seconds. Boak got the first one from Pribble, and then Mark Christo scored as he won the face-off and got the puck over to Boak. And so it was 1-2, and Mark scored. And they scored at the end. And Duds thought we played a great game, and it's just one of those frustrating games where you dominate play and you just can't put the puck in the net. But finally managed to break him down, and it said there this was the first game an Owatonna team ever played without a penalty. So that was quite an accomplishment, to play a whole game without the ref calling anything on us. Here's a picture of, you can see 3 of the Mayo guys, and then you got Casey and Woody there trying to put the puck in the net. And at this time we were 12-1 in the conference and still in the lead, and only had Burnsville left to play. This was an article in the Owatonna Photo News written by Dick Chamberlain, and it says Owatonna Indians Icemen meet Burnsville to determine Southern Minnesota Hockey League champion. So you can see the standings there. We've got a record of 12-1, and Burnsville is 11-2. So if they beat us, we both have 12-2 conference records and end up tied. And no, we didn't want that at all. There's no way we're going to let them do that. And this kind of rehashes, it talks about our game against John Marshall and Mayo. And that was the first year that we beat the Rochester schools all 4 games. So that was a pretty big accomplishment back then, because that had never happened. And, anytime you beat Rochester is a good thing. And then it talked about the upcoming regional and how we might be ranked. And then it talked about Burnsville and talked about Mike Wong. It said he was playing forward and defense. And I looked up the bio about Mike Wong, and he was like I said before, he was a great big guy, about 6'3", over 200 pounds. And he ended up being drafted 77th by the Detroit Red Wings back in the 7th round in, I think, 1977. And managed to play with the Red Wings for about 20 games at the end of one of their seasons and got a goal. So this guy was a really great player and a tough guy to play against. And he was also, I looked up, he said he was a Golden Glove state champ. So he didn't want to get in a fight with this guy because that could be bad news. So we were looking forward to it, playing Burnsville again for the championship game. Nobody expected that. They expected JM to walk away with the title again this year, but one of us was going to prevent that. This is a copy of the season ticket that my mom and dad both had, and they managed to attend every home game. The first game we played against Albert Lee, we were considered the away team, so no punch for that one. And you can see there for 10 games it was $7.50, so 75 cents a game to watch us play. And we're glad that all the people showed up. Not only did my mom and dad have punched out cards like this, but many other parents and fans followed us throughout the season. So we had a lot of great support that year, and we're happy to see everybody turn up. This is an article that was in the Owatonna People's Press the morning of the game day, and it said Icemen vie with Burnsville for Southern Minnesota Hockey League title possession. And it just talked about the team. It's just kind of a rehash about what was said in the previous article. You know, it was going to be a tough game, but the one advantage we have was we were going to play at Shattuck, and we were tough to beat there. So we're looking forward to playing them, and it all boiled down to this one night. This is a picture of myself, Johnny Olson right by me, Mark Christo number 9 there, and Bill Chesney kind of skating off on the right. And this was before the Burnsville game, and you can see, look at all the people. I mean, there were like 6 and 7 deep all around the arena, and then you can see the young kids kind of standing up on the board. So this was just a nightmare game for Burnsville. I mean, everybody was right on top of them. I think there was probably some saliva that was deposited on their shoulders and helmets from the kids standing behind their bench. But it was a tough game, and you can see the chicken wire, you know, on the nets. We didn't have plexiglass back then, so you could hear everything that was being said in the crowd or all the cheering. It was just like, it was pretty exciting, and this was a fun game. So it was going to be our last official game for Owatonna High after 4 seasons of home games at Shattuck. So we definitely wanted to go out of here with a bang and win a title in front of all these people. And they weren't going to be let down. This was an incredible game, the most incredible game I think a lot of us played in, at least in high school. And here's those same 4 guys that were in the previous picture. Johnny's on the left, Mark, and then Bill, and then me. So we got together when I flew in to visit these guys and had a great supper, and that happened a couple times. So it's always fun to see these guys and rehash a few old memories and talk about our glory days. Well, this was going to be our final regular season game at Shattuck ever, because the Four Seasons Arena was under construction and they already planned to play the next season over there. So, you know, looking back on this, I think the old barn sprinkled a lot of puck luck on us that night, because we probably shouldn't have won that game, but we did. And, you know, if somebody wrote a movie script about this, people would say there's no way this ever happened. So, but it did, and I think this was the most exciting game ever played at Shattuck. It was came right down to the championship. If we won, we were outright champs. If we lost, we'd be tied with Burnsville for the championship. So we did not want to lose to these guys. So it was all or nothing at this point, and there was no way we wanted to go out losers. So, you know, I think about this game every so often. It was just an incredible, fun game to be in. You know, I think the B squad took a separate bus. They went, I can't remember, but I think they always went earlier, just so their game started like an hour and a half before ours. And when we pulled up in our bus, I mean, the parking lot was packed. Cars were up and down as far as you could see coming in, and there were just people, and we got inside, and the energy level in that building was just unbelievable. I think the people were probably 6 or 7 deep all the way around the arena, and we had guys standing up you know, above the benches, and I felt sorry for some of those Burnsville people or those Burnsville players, because some of the younger kids told me they stood up there and just kind of happened to let a little saliva loose down on these guys. And so it was a fun game, and had everything you can imagine. And I mean, if I was to tell you that, you know, there was 2 or 3, 4 lead changes, and then you know, a shorthanded goal in overtime, and you know, arguably our captain, our best player, got kicked out for fighting. So it was a pretty intense game. Let me pause here for a second and just get some water and talk about it. So Burnsville came in and they only had two losses, and so we were not, as I said, we weren't going to let them beat us down there. And Burnsville was, I think this was like the start of their upward trajectory as hockey power in Minnesota. I think they won at least two, maybe three state championships in the future. And they had a great coach, Tom Osiki, and I think his son Mark ended up playing at Wisconsin and maybe coaching down there. But so they had a lot of great players. They were pretty much a junior team. They had Mike Wong, who was an incredible defenseman or forward wherever they played him. He was a guy you had to watch out for. And Bowl and Holmquist, they had a lot of really good players, but they were going to have to wait a year, and we weren't going to let them win the title there. So in the first period, it started out, and we got a lot of shots on net, but their goalie was playing pretty well and stopped everything, and they managed to get a goal. Steve Schneider scored about 11 minutes in. So in the second period, the play really opened up, and then 4 minutes gone in the period, Mark Christo scored, and it said Ross stopped two hard close-in shots before Mark picked up the puck and lifted it over Ross's outstretched body. And Chuck Pribble got the assist on that one. So neither goalie had a lot of saves in that period. Then the third period, oh my gosh, that was just so intense. Just up and down, up and down. Both teams were just, obviously going for the win. And we took the lead. Chuck Pribble tipped in Johnny Olson's shot from the point with about 4.5 minutes left to play. And it looked, at that point, looked pretty good for us. So, we had played pretty well in the previous games when we got a lead in the third period, so we expected to do the same thing. But Burnsville had other ideas about that, and 59 seconds left. I remember Wong came up the ice and passed it over, and they got, it was just a scramble in front of the net, and Paul Holmquist got the puck and scored with 59 seconds left. So it was just, oh man, what a battle. And it went into overtime, obviously, and that's when it really got fun. So 22 seconds into the overtime, Boak got high-sticked and kind of gave a face washing to one of the Burnsville players. So because of this new rule, the duking that we had talked about in some of the previous slides, came to the forefront, and Dan was showing the gate. And talk about shock. I mean, it was like, our captain just got ejected from the game. Plus, we were shorthanded. So, it looked pretty bleak for us at that point, but there was no way we were going to let Boak down. So, we really scrambled around, and so we were shorthanded. And it said that Holmquist also got a high sticking penalty, but I seem to remember that we were shorthanded the whole overtime. So from 22 seconds in, it was just Burnsville had their way with us. We could not get the puck out of the zone. Literally for until we scored, we could not get the puck out of the zone. I remember Johnny sliding along the boards because, everybody was just exhausted. We could barely stand up, and Johnny yells at me. He says, "Goonie, freeze the puck," because, and I was like, I can't. If it gets close, obviously I'll do that. But so far, it hadn't gotten close enough to me that I could fall on it. So, and guys were just so exhausted. Pretty much over 4 minutes shorthanded, and I don't think there was a whistle the whole overtime. It was just nonstop Burnsville, and they had, like I said, they had their way with us. And so they had 7 shots, and all of them were like A plus, right, right in front of the net. It seemed like, and when I think back on it, I think each one of them wanted to be the hero and score the winning goal. So instead of probably passing to the guy that's wide open on the back door, they wanted to take a shot. And because Duds had been an ex-goalie during this season, he had Brad and I line up, and we'd put about 6 or 7 guys about 10 feet out, and just go from one side of up and down the line, and these guys would just be firing shots. So this was no different than in practice. And we managed to stonewall them. And all of a sudden, the puck got along the boards, and I talked to Gunner about this, and he said Chuck Pribble made an excellent pass, which isn't unusual. I mean, Chuck was an incredible passer, and Gunner saw the open ice and picked up the puck, and all the Burnsville guys were scrambling to catch up with him, and he let a shot fly, and this guy had a really wicked slap shot, and Jerry Ross kicked out and was maybe a little bit too early, and it hit the inside of his leg, bounced off, and it went in. When that red light came on, I mean, the place erupted. I threw off my stuff. I was just, as high as I could, threw my stick in the air and just skated down, and everybody was jumping on everybody else, and it was just a free-for-all. The place was going crazy, and Burnsville obviously thought they should have won the game, and it was too bad. But Boak must have been agonizing while he's in that locker room, hearing the screams and shouts and everything. But there's no way we were going to let him down, and we managed to pull it out. And boy, talk about a grand finale for the Shattuck Arena, and that was our home for 4 years. That was the game. So obviously we were extremely happy when we won that. So anyhow, it's a good memory from almost 50 years ago now. This is a rehash of the article that was in the photo or in the People's Press, and it came out in the Photo News 5 days later, and it said the Indians win the Southern Minnesota Hockey League title 3-2 over Burnsville, and it just rehashed the game there, and then it said DeWard is a hard worker who spends a lot of extra time working on any weaknesses in his game. And so a lot of us went down to the Chalet and Wierzinski rink on the weekend and just skated around and played a little bit of shinny. And then it said, at this point in time, we knew all the regional pairings were out. And we knew we were going to play North St. Paul Tartan on the 24th, which was, it was like 12 days after our last game, which was, it was really incredible. So anyway, Duds had set up scrimmages with Brady and Shattuck. Shattuck was nothing to really play against. They were pretty hopeless at that point. And then it said we might set up scrimmages with Southwest and the 2 Rochester teams. I'm not sure that would have been a good idea after we just beat them a couple weeks earlier. So anyhow, he talked at the end about all the fans and everybody that had followed us around all season. It was boy, they really did a lot, and they really helped us a lot. They added a lot of energy to the game. And it talked about the B squad records. And it said here at the end, the Indian notes, said it was feared Boakey would miss the Tartan game because of fighting, but the rule states that player will miss the next regularly scheduled league game. So since this was a tournament game, he was able to play. And Mark Christo told me that right after this, the State Hockey League changed the rule to say, if you get kicked out for fighting, then you don't play in the next game, whether it's the state championship or whatever it is. So uh, because of that little duker against Burnsville, it changed one of the rules. And then it said the first line had broken the scoring record by Bokeh, Christo, and Pribble, which they probably broke their own record from the previous year. So you can see we were getting a lot of press back then. It was pretty incredible, small town, and these guys, Dick Chamberlain, I never met him, but Carl Sainer, he'd hang out in the locker room, and so, to call up Bill and Duds and, give them an insight into the next game or whatever they were thinking about. It was a small town, and they were able to do that. So, it was a great time to grow up in that town. Lot of support. I mean, we had, we were competing with the teams all the way back to 1926. So we were doing our best to carry on the tradition of Owatonna hockey, and I think we did a pretty good job. This is a picture of Johnny Olson and Bill Chesney, one of the defensive pairs, and Mark Bowes, the Burnsville player in the picture there. And you can see our helmets at that time. There were these Cooper helmets, and it looks like Burnsville had some custom ones made. I think they had the big B there in the front. I think they were kind of like not quite a yellow, not quite a brown, something in between there. So something to do with their school colors, but we weren't quite that sophisticated or rich. So we had the white natural Cooper helmets. And after looking at a couple of these pictures, I'm kind of curious why the reporter here who was taking the pictures didn't take any pictures after we, of Gunners, the reaction after Gunners scored the goal, or anyway, that's something that just kind of went through my head. That would have been boy, I wish we had a picture of that, and along with the one in the locker room. Boy, when this picture's in the locker room after we all gathered, came off the bus and hung out, it was a pretty joyous scene. And boy, the people greeting us there was just pretty incredible. I mean, as soon as we stepped off the bus, there were, I don't know, it seemed like there were hundreds of people there cheering us on, and happy that we had beaten Burnsville and won the championship. So everybody's in here. You can see Beezer, he's hidden right behind Johnny's head there, and kind of by, I think, Gramps' left arm, but who else can you not see? But my mom was really upset when they published this picture in the photo news, or not in the photo news, in the People's Press, and it cut, you could barely see me, and it cut Bill Ryden, Conway, and me off. And so when they cropped it, we were out, and she was extremely upset about that. But that's the way it was back then. And so this is the full-size picture of the team, and it was a pretty incredible time. Pretty proud that I was a member of that team that won the first league title for Owatonna High, and was able to play with all these guys. This was another article that came out at the same time as the Burnsville story, and this shows Mark Matichek in the picture getting along the boards with Sam Thompson from Burnsville. And then the article to the right talks about the B squad winning the title. So they had an incredible 16-0-1 record and beat Burnsville that night 2-0. And it said Brad Vogt scored with an assist from Paul Adamson, and then Paul Adamson scored the second goal when he tipped in Bill Stewart's hard slap shot. Excuse me. That said, Brad had another shutout, his fifth shutout of the year for B squad, and he had another one with the A squad. So he was on his way up, and JC and I used to kid a little bit at that. We were the guys that were in between all the Austin goaltenders in Owatonna. You had Kenny Austin. You know, he probably played on some of the men's leagues back in the 50s. And then he had his sons, Jim and Doug, who played on the Pee Wees, Bantams, and midget teams, and probably juveniles and maybe men's league after that. Then JC and I snuck in there for a few years, and then Brad came along. So the other teams must have wondered if the Austin goalie pipeline would ever end. And you know, we tried to keep up with them, and hopefully did pretty good. This is an article that says OHS B squad B skaters remain unbeaten, and they went 16-0-1 that year. And you can see on the right side it puts all the records to date. And the first year we were 12-0, the second one 11-1-1, third year 9-2-5, and then this year 16-0-1. So for the 4 years I was in high school, we were 48-3-7, which is incredible. And you know, this article talks a lot about Bill Ryden, and what I talked about in the earlier slide is I lifted a lot of the information from this article. So it's kind of a repeat what was already in one of the earlier slides. And you can see the scores of the B squad record, and one that's on the right side there, on the far side, it says Shattuck. They beat Shattuck's varsity 11-0. So, you know, I'm sure that wouldn't happen today, you know, with all the midget titles and future pros showing up over there. So, but it's kind of funny to look at it now. And you can see the B squad statistics. Chris Cashman had 27 points that year. He put in 19 goals. And Kevin Finley had a great year, pretty balanced there, 14 goals, 13 assists. Stroche was right behind him, and Wally Risberg. And a lot of those guys I ended up playing with on Weber's Bar team a couple years down the road. And then for the goalies, Brad and Dudley Walters. In 17 games, they only gave up 19 goals, so it's pretty tough to lose a game when you're only letting in a little over 1 goal a game and scoring, what was it, 5.3 goals per game. So, you know, these were guys that were going to go on, most of them, I should say, we're going to go on and play in the next 2 years, and those teams also had incredible records. This team picture was posted on Cover the Photo News on February 17th, 5 days after we won the Southern Minnesota Hockey League title. And the article says this is the official team picture taken after that big win. So here we are. What a bunch of guys, great bunch of guys there, and I'm glad to be part of them. We're going to open our regional play with North St. Paul Tartan. I think they were a new school, and we had never played them, so this was going to be a new game, and they were ranked considerably lower than us, so we kind of expected to beat them. And then you can see the summary of the final standings for the Southern Minnesota Hockey League. And then the individual scoring. Crystal and Volke were 1 and 2. And then Chuck was down the list a little bit. But if you look at that list, you can see Burnsville had Wong, Holmquist, Bow, and Skindeline were all juniors. So the next year they were going to have a pretty incredible year, I think. And the individual records set this year were set by our first line, all except for the most hat tricks in the season. That was a tie with Pat Nowitzki and Mark. So, we had some real snipers on that team. And you can see there on the, underneath our standings, all the individual team players' records, how many goals they got. And it shows at the bottom that Brad and I had a pretty good save percentage. So that's always a good thing to look at. And so everybody was doing their part. We had defense and we had offense. So we were a pretty formidable team. On February 24th, we played our first game of the regions, 12 days after we had beaten Burnsville. So we were a bit rusty, and we played North St. Paul Tartan, which was a fairly new school at that point. And we had to play them up at Owatonna Arena, which seemed to be the home arena for most of the teams in our region. So it said Gunner got a couple goals, and he helped us dig out, and take the lead in the second period. But the first period, we were a little bit tight. We hadn't played for a while. We usually played every 2 to 4 nights. So having 12 days off, we were a little rusty there. And it said our first goal came when Boak picked up a tartan pass in front of me and passed it up to Christo, breaking up the ice. So those guys had played together quite a few years, and they knew exactly where each person was going to be. So they also did this up at Bemidji when they got Steve Letourneau to replace Chuck Pribble, and they had 4 years of that kind of stuff. So they knew, by instinct where the other one was going to be. So anyway, Mark came down, and he was probably putting them, starting to put the moves on about once he crossed the blue line, and the goalie had to wonder what he was going to do, and Mark beat him, scored the goal, and then they got a goal in the first period. It said they jumped on a loose puck about 6 feet in front of me and tapped it in. So end of the period was 1-1, and then the second period we started to get our legs and play a little bit better. And Gunner had a couple of goals in that period. And first one, he put a hard shot high in the corner, and the second one was another hard slap shot that deflected off somebody's stick and went in. So I didn't have much work that period or the third period. So it's just a matter of how many goals we're going to score there. And third period, we got a couple power play goals. Woody dug one out of the corner and fed Casey, and he put it in. And then Bo got a perfect pass in front of the net from Johnny Olson and slammed it in. So we had our first game behind us, and we're ready to play 2 nights later against Sibley. So said here we had a large delegation of fans that attended the game, 2 student buses, an adult bus, which was probably for those people who wanted to have a few adult beverages on the way up and not worry about driving home. And so we had great fan support the whole season, and they were really behind us at this point. And the picture there shows Chuck Pribble, and he didn't get any points in this game, but I just want to talk about Chuck. He was an outstanding player in his own right, and maybe a little bit overshadowed by Boke and Christo, but I think he was the kind of guy who enjoyed making a great pass, and I know there's a lot of players like that. They set up somebody real nice and get some oohs and ahs, and so anyway, Chuck was a great player, and he went to the Air Force Academy and played out there, and had quite a few assists also. So great guy, very, very studious. Dudge used to give him a bad time. He called him, he was a lover, not a fighter. And Chuck liked to hit hard. I mean, he was a guard in football, so he was used to hitting, and he just didn't like the dirty stuff. He was a clean player and played the game the way it should be. So kudos to him. He was a great teammate, very serious, studied hard, wasn't one to go hang out with the guys afterwards. He had definitely had plans for after he got out of high school. So anyhow, we're going to play Sibley on Saturday night and hope we could get by them. And this article says Sibley Skaters and Indian Hopes, and this was a really tough one to take. These guys were ranked lower than we were. They were ranked fifth in the region, so they had a good team. They were mostly sophomores, and I think in 2 years when these guys became seniors, they went to the state tournament. But this is a team we probably should have beat that night. And anyway, puck luck didn't seem to be with us. I think we'd probably used it all up against Burnsville. And it said Sibley scored in the first period. It said it appeared that I stopped the shot easily, but then it dribbled off my skates and into the net. So, bad time to give up a leaker goal like that. And so anyway, let's see. They made it 2-0. They got a power play and put in the net. So. And then we had it says we had a lot of excellent but unsuccessful scoring attempts until Cosmic got us on the scoreboard. And it said he fought through Sibley defenders behind the net. And as he broke loose and came out front, he reached from behind the net and stuffed it in. So it said although the goal was unassisted, Bill Conway should get a lot of credit because his excellent forechecking kept Sibley bottled up in their end. And we also had in the second period, we had a two-man advantage and couldn't put the puck in the net. And we had, it says we had like 3 excellent scoring opportunities, and it's just one of those nights where things didn't go our way. So it was a tough loss. And then in the third period, it was 2-1 going in there, and right off the opening face-off, somebody shot, hit all kinds of skates, sticks probably, and then all of a sudden, I know it's trickling between my legs. So just one of those goals, it was just a fluky goal, and it was too bad. And like I said, I'd used up our puck luck, and that's the way it goes. But being a senior, that was the last time I was going to pull off the old OHS jersey, and boy, I was devastated like all the other seniors. I mean, when you're a freshman, you think, or underclassman, you think, okay, next year or the year after, or in Bill Conway's case, he had 3 more years ahead of him. But boy, for the 10 guys who were seniors that year, I can tell you I was just devastated. I found a place by myself, buried my head in my trapper, and just cried my eyes out. I was, the journey was over, all the way from Pee-wees through Bantams, through B squad, through all the practices we'd put in, all the bus rides between Owatonna and Shattuck. It was all over, and it was hard to believe, and really tough, and went in the locker room finally, and everybody's taking off their equipment, and some guys took a lot longer because, it was, like I said, it was really devastating, and nobody wanted to look at anybody else because, everybody had tears in their eyes. Room was quiet. Duds didn't say much, there wasn't much to say at that point. He knew how bad everybody felt. So anyway, that's the way it goes. But, you just sometimes stop and think, if we would have been able to play in our usual rhythm, what would have happened. And it got a little frustrating because it seems like some of the teams out of the cities got a better break. I don't know why we couldn't have played a game earlier down at either Graham Arena or Shattuck. It's, everybody had to go to one of these rinks up in St. Paul where we were playing somebody else on somebody else's home ice. So I'm sure Duds and Bill were pretty miffed when they had to deal with all this. So anyhow, that's the way it went, and it was a great career. And looking back, I mean, 18-4 was something to be really proud of, and it was too bad it had to end on that note. This is a rehash of the previous article. Here you can see all the people up at Wakota. Everybody's packed behind the net. A lot of people watching us, and it's just funny because we wore our away jerseys even though we were the higher ranked team. It's like seriously, we were should have been wearing our blue jerseys there. And it's just like I said, it's just a rehash and a little frustrating the way it ended. This was an article that came out the following week in the Photo News, story by Dick Chamberlain, and it talks about the long layoff, and it said Bill Ryden said we had 3 open net shots in the second period and we missed all of them. So that was the turning point in the game, and Duds was optimistic for the following year. Even though we lost 10 seniors, we had outstanding boys returning, 8 lettermen plus guys off the undefeated B squad team. So, and they were going to try to have a Christmas tournament the next year. So that's what they were, what the underclassmen were looking forward to. And Dud said this year's seniors were the finest group he's ever worked with. They were totally dedicated on and off the ice. They were a great influence on our young players, and they always played for the team. Also, those who didn't play much, guys like Kevin Finley, Bill Stewart, and Jim Ernst were always behind those guys playing and cheering from the bench. So, and he said, all the how close the team got on all those bus rides. So the next year they would have another fabulous season, although Burnsville beat them out for the Southern Minnesota Hockey League title. But they also had an 18-4 record, which I'll talk about in another episode. So players off this team, we had a really good spell there. And this is the paper that was handed out for the Region 1 hockey tournament. And you can see Rosemont and Austin had a play-in game and had to go to overtime. So Austin was hot. They got a couple goals there and almost pulled it out. So, and you can see South St. Paul was ranked number 1, North St. Paul was number 2, we were 3, and then Matamidi and Sibley. So South St. Paul barely got by John Marshall's, and then Burnsville ended up losing to Matamidi, and Farmington beat North St. Paul in 3 overtimes. So good for them, and boy, it would have been nice to have met Farmington again in a rubber game to see who would come out in that season series, but it wasn't to be. So Sibley did make it into the region finals against South St. Paul and ended up getting beat 6-3. So South St. Paul became Region 1's representative in the state tournament. And we put 5 players on the all-conference team. Naturally, they were the first line, Boki, Christo, Pribble, and then myself, and then Dan Horka for defense. And Johnny Golson got honorable mention. So Mark led the league in scoring with 20 goals and 11 assists for a total of 31 points. And he also garnered individual records for most goals in a game with 7, most points in a game with 8. And he was tied with Boak, who was the league's second highest scorer in last category. So Boak had one game he had 6 assists and 2 goals. So anyhow, the 71-72 all-conference team, Dave Hunter, who I thought was a fabulous goalie. I'm not sure what he did after high school, but he was a very, very strong goalie. And then myself. On defense, we had Pat Nowitzki, great player. Brad Sutton, great big defenseman from JM, who was really good. Mike Cadwell from Simley. Horica, and then a couple juniors from Burnsville, Brad Rogge and Mike Wong. The forwards were Dick Green, he was a senior over at Mayo, don't really remember him, or Jeff Lester, who was a junior at Albert Lee. Paul Holmquist, another junior from Burnsville, and then a couple seniors from Farmington, Greg Feely and Gary Schmitz. And then third member of the Dixie line that would team up with Mark and Dan up at Bemidji, Steve Letourneau and Jimbo Radke. They were both seniors from JM. And then our first line. In the honorable mention, he had Johnny Olson, Terry Brown, another big defenseman from JM, Tom Herzog, who was a senior from JM, and then he had three players who were juniors from Burnsville: Mark Bowe, Bruce Skindlin, and Jerry Ross, their goalie. Jim Zulke, who was a wing from Mayo. Dave Pilot, he was a good goalie from Simley. And Joe Schaefer, I guess he had to be the representative from Austin, probably scored all their goals down there. They didn't score many, but he was probably behind most of them. So it was, it was nice to have all these players on the all-conference team, and it's an honor to be a member of that group. And a lot of these guys were going to college and do really well there too. And you can see, Burnsville was just loaded with all these juniors, so they probably had an incredible team the next year. And this was an article that was in the People's Press. You can see Bo, Christo, and Pribble got their pictures in there, and then it pretty much talks about what I just talked about there in the previous slide. So was this one of Owatonna's best teams? I would have to say so. I mean, when maybe far in the future, when teams are discussing Owatonna's hockey history, we might be mentioned there. After doing all these episodes back from 1925-26, yeah, I would have to say this was one of Owatonna's best teams ever put together. You had I think there was a really good one that was undefeated back in the 30s. Jack Wierzinski said it was one of his best teams. I think it was 35-36. A lot of good players then. And I'm sure there were, some of the teams from the 50s when they had some of the men's league teams. And then into the 60s when he had all the great midget teams. So I think we'd have to be mentioned up there with some of those teams. And obviously I believe it was 91-92 when Owatonna first made it to the state tournament. So, it's nice to hopefully be mentioned with some of those teams. So anyway, I wanted to rehash why I feel that this might have been one of our best teams ever. So the final stats for the season, you can see the paper on the left there. Mark had a total of 43 points, Boak had 42, and then Chuck had 28. So one thing I wanted to point out, Bill Conway had 0 penalty minutes, and in his 4-year career he only had 2 penalties, which is pretty amazing. Guy could score, but he was also would have been nominated for the Lady Byng Trophy there as the very sportsmanlike player. Anyhow, went through, being the engineer that I am, I had to go through and do some of this math here. And in our 18 wins, we only gave up 1.4 goals against average, and we scored an average of 5.3 goals. So in those wins, we had it clicking. We were playing really well as a team. And in our 4 losses, we gave up 18 goals, and we only scored 5 goals. So 2 of those losses, the 5-1 loss to Bloomington Jefferson in our second game, and then the stinker against Farmington, we didn't do too well. But Minnetonka and Sibley could have gone either way, but we lost that. So we gave up a lot of goals, obviously, when we lost, and we had 5 shutouts and 6 one-goal games. So we had a tight team defensively. It was tough to beat us when we were on our game. We were 11-0 at Shattuck that year. We had 10 home games plus the one away game that we played there against Albert Lee in our first game. We won 7 games in the third period and 2 in overtime. So we had learned from the previous years how to win these close games, and it really paid off. Plus all the conditioning that we did at the start of the season, and Duds had us running in place and running and doing all that calisthenics. paid off in the end. And we beat Rochester, JM, and Mayo all 4 times that year, which was a real accomplishment. It was those schools were always good, and it was anytime we could beat them was great. And then to sweep both season series was even more of a feather in our cap. And we tied for the best overall season record that stood for 20 years. The team the following year also had an 18-4 record. So between 71, 72, and 72, 73 seasons, we had it going on, and until the team went to the state in 91, 92, those overall team records stood for 20 years. And some of the 71, 72 team records that are still standing. We allowed the least goals in regular season, 38 goals, or 1.9 goals against average. The least goals allowed in one season, 43 goals in 22 games, or just a little bit less than 2 goals per game. So, the team can really be proud of these records. That shows that everybody bought into playing defense. Everybody's back checking. The defense was playing tough in our end. And Brad and I were shutting them down when we're practicing pretty much every day of the week against guys like Bokey, Christo, Pribble, Cosmic, Gunner, you name it, Casey, everybody like that, all these snipers. We got pretty good. So if we could stop them in practice, as I said before, we were going to have a real good chance of stopping the other team, snipers as well. So, raise a toast to everybody on that team. That's total defense. And we had the longest consecutive home winning streak that went for 17 games from February 13th of 71 till it must have been the Christmas tournament of 73 there. I think they lost to Hastings in the first Owatonna Hockey Classic. So players from the 70-71 season are also included in this one. And we beat Mayo at the end of the 71 season, and then swept all their games in 71, 72, and then they must have won 6 games before they got beaten in the Holiday Classic. We had the best Southern Minnesota Hockey League record for Owatonna, 13-1. We're the champions that year of our league. And there's also a lot of players on that team that were in the all-time individual scoring list. You had Bill Conway, who was number 2. He played 86 games, scored 80 goals, and had 62 assists for a total of 142 points, or about 1.7 points per game. So that's a pretty phenomenal number. And number 15, Boak just cracked the Century Club there. He played 78 games and scored 55 goals and 46 assists. So he had 101 points, or a little over 1.3 points per game. Casey was number 20. He played, the records were he got cut off there, so I'm kind of guessing at these, but he played 66 games, scored 47 goals, and had 40 assists for 87 points, or same point per game average as Boak had, 1.3. Horica still the all-time leading defenseman. There were a couple of guys that had forward defensemen that were had higher scoring records, but I'd say Horica was just totally a defenseman. And in 86 games, same as what Conway played, he had 37 goals and 41 assists for 78 points. So a little less than a point per game, but if you're a defenseman and you're scoring like that, you're doing pretty well. And Horica was just he was the rushing defenseman. He also could play excellent defense, but he wasn't afraid to step up in the play or try to skate through everybody. And right behind him was Mark Christo. He played 54 games, had 44 goals and 31 assists. So total of 75 points, or 1.4 points per game, which is excellent. And then Michael Morris rounds out the list at number 40. He played in 64 games, had 31 goals, 35 assists for 66 points, or a little over a point per goal per game. So those were, all those snipers that we had on that team was, even now you can see that they were some of the best scorers to come out of that high school. And we still have a lot of individual records set by players on the 71-72 team. They may not have set it during that season, but within the next year or two, they were going to set all kinds of records that still stand. So most goals in a regular season, Bill Conway, you're going to see his name on here a lot. 29 in 20 games. This was the following year. Most goals by a defenseman in regular season. Horka, he had 11 in 71-72, and then same in the following year. Most goals in a game, Bill Conway, 8 versus Albert Lee in 72-73. Lowest goals against average in regular season, Brad Austin, 1.9 in 20 games. That was the following year. Lowest goals against average in one season, also Brad. The following year, he had 2.0 in 22 games. So most assists in one game, Boak had 6 against Albert Lee in 71-72. Most points in a regular season, 20 games by a defenseman. Gunner and Kosmik both had 24 points the following year. Most points in one game, Conway, he had 9, which consisted of 8 goals and an assist. Most hat tricks in one season, again, Conway, 5 in 72-73. Geez, I mean, it goes on and on. Most goals in a career, Conway had 80 in 86 games. That went from 1971 through 75. And Brad had the most shutouts in a career. I think he's tied with Doug Voss. He had 7 from 71-74 through 74. And there's a kid named Ryan Johnson. I think he had 6. So I'm not sure if that guy stayed around or transferred or what. But, pretty good to have Brad up there. And what happened after high school? 10 played college hockey. Probably could have been the 11th, but I wasn't too interested in hard studies at that point in my life. 5 became captains of their college team. So Boak and Christo became captains of Bemidji State. Conway became captain at Yale. And Kosmik was a captain at Gustavus Adolphus, and then Chuck Pribble was a captain out at Air Force. So, when you're the captain of a team, you're usually one of the better players, and that's something Owatonna can be really proud of. 3 college championships. This number might have changed. I'm going to talk about this more in the college episode. But Boak and Christo, I think, won maybe their first year. They won one of the, I'm not sure what conference it was, but they won a college championship up at Bemidji State. And then Johnny Olson won one for Saint Scholastica. And Brad and Kosmik probably think that they should have won one. They got there was a bad call at the end of one championship game, and it didn't go their way. So instead of them winning the college championship, Saint Scholastica did. But talk about that more later on. And Mark Christo was voted one of the 50 best players in the first 50 years of Bemidji State hockey, which is a real accomplishment. And he also won the 1976 Bangsburg Athletic Honor as top student athlete at Bemidji State. So that's really impressive. You have all these other athletes up there, and so Mark not only showed that he had the smarts, to do well up there, but he was also an excellent hockey player. And Bill Conway was invited to try out for the 1980 USA Olympic hockey team, but he had a knee injury when he was at Yale and wasn't able to follow through with that. So who knows what might have happened there. And this is just a little clip. I said that International Falls, this is probably one of the last games that was between two northern teams for the state championship. The International Falls pulled it out 3-2 over Grand Rapids, and Grand Rapids was a lot of the players that we had played in the VFW state tournament back in Bantams were some of the same guys that were on the Grand Rapids team. So they came up a little short there, but those were the state. Falls was the state champ that year. And this we had our Southern Minnesota Hockey League Championship banquet that year on March 13th. It was down at the Elks Club. And it said honoring Southern Minnesota Hockey League champions and the undefeated OHS B squad. And the guest speaker was supposed to be Herb Brooks. He didn't show up. I think Brad Buto ended up coming in his place. But and this is what was in there. So Todd Hale back then was the MC as usual. He was always good at that. Dr. Word presented some trophies. Bo got because he was the captain, he got the trophy for the Southern Minnesota Hockey League. And then it just said we were the guests of honor and showed the 71-72 B squad that was undefeated. And then the team records that were set are equal in the 71-72 season. So we had just broken the records from the previous year. And then the following season, Conway and all those guys broke all these records. So these didn't hold up too long, but it was good to be in there for at least a year on some of these records. And this just shows the final standings, some of the individual records. And here I am with duds. You can see I'm a real, got my fashion going there with my nice green double, what do they call that? Forget, double button blazer or something with my yellow shirt and green tie. So that was one of the few pictures I had with duds. Great guy, really miss him. Too bad, would have loved to have talked to him about some of this stuff that I put in here. Or just to go back and reminisce. He was a great guy, great coach, and definitely learned a lot from him. So we all miss him. And this is a plaque that was presented to everybody on the championship that team that year. You can see it says in recognition of his membership on the Southern Minnesota Hockey League Championship during the 71-72 season, and whoever that is, Kevin Engelhardt, I guess, is the league president, and Dud signed it. So all something we can put up on our glory wall and show our kids and grandkids how great we were back then. And I put this picture up here. Lee Hara, the guy that I circled there right in the front, he was the captain of the 62 Minnesota State Midget second runner-up team. They lost to one of the teams out of Duluth that year. Small guy, but he was the captain, one of the captains, so he must have been quite the player. And you can see you had a lot of great players and coaches on that team. Austin boys, Kenny Austin was one of the coaches, Boomer McLaughlin, Denny Ewell, Noel Janke. I mean, a lot of really good players, Rod Block, Squeak Malman, Jerry Johnson. I went through these guys. They had a really great team, but the reason I included this is Lee Hara unfortunately got killed in Vietnam in January of 68, I believe it was, and maybe 69, but it was unfortunate, and because of that we named the most valuable player, most valuable senior, I guess it is, and named the trophy after him. So I was at the Four Seasons Arena a number of years ago, and they had this plaque up on the wall there, and this is the Lee Hara Hockey Award that was presented to the OHS player voted by his teammates, as the most valuable senior on the team. So, oh, it said he was killed January 30th of '69, right in Vietnam. So Shannon Owen was the first recipient, and then I played with the next two guys, Furby and Scotty, both defensemen, and a lot of fun to play with them. Really good defensemen. And then I won it in '71, '72. So Duds must have been proud. Finally, a goalie, was getting some recognition there, and I I was the most surprised person when I was awarded this, and it really means a lot to be voted on by your teammates. I thought Boke or Crystal would get it, so I was surprised, and when they called my name and said that I had won the trophy that year, and it really means a lot when your teammates vote you as what they feel is the most valuable player. Even though I won the individual award, like I've said before, it was a total team effort. It was, just everybody played excellent defense that year. We had all the scoring, so I'm not going to go back and rehash all that, but it's a real honor to see my name up there with all these other great players that played for OHS. I played with Crazy Legs Thompson, played a couple years with him at Weber's Bar, good defenseman. And then you had Horica, Conway, a couple of the DeWards were on there. So Gunnar was the first DeWard that came through, and he wasn't a recipient, but his two younger brothers were a number of years apart. Pete McEnany, that guy's, I've heard about some of these other guys. Didn't see a lot of them play, but it's a real honor to be up there and see all the names that a lot of them went on to play really, played major college hockey at places, so like I said, it's a real honor. And this is the trophy that I won. It says Outstanding Senior OHS 71, 72, and this is one of the only two trophies I have. The other one was when we went to the state tournament in 1968 for the Bantam VFW tournament, and came in as runner-ups that year. So this was not a participation trophy. This was one with a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and something I'm extremely proud of, and I dragged it around all over the place. So it's up on the glory wall now, and I can look at it and reminisce a little bit. And someday, I don't know, hopefully my kids or grandkids will appreciate it. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this episode. It was a lot of fun to go back through that season. That was it was a lot of fun, great season, and I thank everybody, all my teammates, for their comments and articles that they sent to me. So if you have any comments, corrections, or questions, please send an email off to me, and I'll do what I can. So, and that's all, folks. This is another episode done, and I'll move on to talk about the next 3 years of Owatonna high school hockey, at least with the articles that I have. It's going to be a little more difficult because I wasn't really involved with those years, but I'll do my best. And as I said, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.